Chen Qing was horrified and almost opened his mouth subconsciously, but Jian Wushuang covered his mouth with his hand. Don't make a sound. Chang Qing nodded and did not dare to make a sound. The wine pot that Yang Jun kept was filled with wine. After fighting for so long, there was still more than half of it left. Yang Jun removed the cork and drank to his heart's content with the other 3 emperors. Di Qing woke up from his coma. When he saw the 4 emperors drinking, he was shocked and quickly moved to Jian Wushuang. Hurry, let's go, Di Qing said in a low voice, his eyes full of panic. Jian Wushuang nodded. Although Emperor Luya and Emperor Yang Jun were old acquaintances, it did not mean that they were safe. After all, they were the ones who first had the idea of entering the heavenly court to search for treasures. It was already very fortunate that they could safely withdraw now. Immediately, the 5 figures prepared to leave the heavenly court while the 4 emperors were drinking. Stop there. Emperor Luya's eyes shot out a cold glint. You want to leave just like that after coveting the people of my heavenly court? Cold sweat trickled down from everyone's temples. The pressure from the emperor was too vast, making them feel like they had fallen into an ice cave. Luya, you can kill them, but not that little friend. After taking a big gulp of wine, Yang Jun pointed at Jian Wushuang and said, Why? Emperor Luya asked. It's because that little friend has an affinity with us and bears great responsibilities, Yang Jun said mysteriously. Emperor Luya did not refute him. He looked away from Jian Wushuang and at Di Qing, Chen Qing, and the others. At that moment, they all looked at Jian Wushuang in the face of death. Senior, you can't kill any of them. Just as Emperor Luya was about to attack, Jian Wushuang's calm voice was heard and he stood up slowly. He had lost an arm and had not fully recovered. His body was shaking, and his face was pale. We've been hunted down by the outside world before, and we accidentally entered the heavenly court by chance. We didn't come here on purpose to covet it. Besides, we didn't do anything to harm the heavenly court. It's too unreasonable to kill us just like that. In the hall, only Jian Wushuang's calm voice echoed. When Emperor Luya heard this, he laughed coldly. If he doesn't have any coveting thoughts, then why did he touch my true body? Di Qing looked at Jian Wushuang for help as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He frowned slightly and quickly thought of countermeasures in his mind. After a while, Jian Wushuang raised his head and said, Senior, it was indeed our fault. We wanted to see the Emperor's real face, but we couldn't help but touch the Emperor's true body. We are guilty. At this point, he turned to Di Qing and said calmly, Di Qing, cut off an arm. Di Qing was stunned at first, but then he nodded without any hesitation. This was the way out of death that Jian Wushuang had found for him. At the price of 1 arm, he could exchange it for a way out. He did not hesitate to swing his palm at his arm, but he soon realized that he could not cut it down at all. Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he saw that. It meant that Emperor Luya did not intend to let them live. Emperor Luya, who was suspended in the air, snorted coldly. You want to settle this matter with just 1 arm? From Emperor Luya's cold tone, it was obvious that he was not going to let them go. However, Jian Wushuang's eyes were calm and he said, Yes, just 1 arm. Whoosh! An unparalleled emperor's pressure swept out and almost crushed them into dust in an instant. Then, Emperor Luya raised his arm and dragged Jian Wushuang up in the air. The indescribable feeling of suffocation brought him close to death. You're not afraid of me? Emperor Luya's emotionless voice resounded. Jian Wushuang looked straight at him and said in a hoarse voice, I'm afraid, but nothing can be solved by fear. Instead of being afraid, it's better to find the best solution. The heavenly court was deathly silent, so silent that one could hear the sound of breathing. After an unknown period of time, the stone-like Emperor Luya moved. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. This kid is not bad. I have my eyes on him. The 3 imperial emperors looked at each other and pouted. Don't give me that. We've even a liking to him before you. Stop bullshitting. You guys can't even save yourselves. What help can you give him? Emperor Luya's face was filled with disdain. He then looked at Jian Wushuang. You're just to my liking, kid. I want to give you a great opportunity. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was a little dizzy, but he reacted immediately and shook his head. I'm not talented enough. I'm afraid I can't take it. It's best to forget it. The atmosphere froze. Everyone was shocked, even the three emperors. An emperor, even if it was the obsession of an emperor, would personally give an opportunity that was enough to plunge countless heavenly regions into chaos and countless grand yen immortals into madness. It was a supreme and unattainable existence. But now he was actually rejected. Everyone was puzzled, but Jian Wushuang was thinking about it. There was no such thing as an opportunity without a reason. If one wanted to get it, he had to pay a corresponding price. If he were to receive the great opportunity from Emperor Luya, there would definitely be a corresponding trust waiting for him. Emperor Luya was stunned when he heard his rejection. However, he immediately shouted angrily, "You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. You have to agree to it today even if you don't want to." With that, his virtual shadow suddenly dimmed. Then, countless wisps of dark green brilliance surged out from his body and directly entered Jian Wushuang's body. The heavenly court trembled and was collapsing rapidly. Listen up, kid. My last obsession is about to be completely destroyed. The great opportunity I'm giving you is not something that ordinary people can endure or sense. Now, I'll give you my final obsession and comprehension. Try to comprehend it well. Emperor Lu Ya's final obsession was collapsing and dissipating. He looked at Jian Wushuang with his golden eyes. If you reach that point, don't forget to stab old man Jin Wuyang for me. Consider that my ask. Lu Ya Heavenly Emperor runes can be comprehended and used, but it can't be used according to my path. Jian Wushuang could no longer speak. It was as if a heat that could even burn his divine soul was exploding in every cell of his. Strands of irresistible external force poured into his body, leaving indelible marks in his mind and divine sense. His broken arm was growing rapidly with the terrifying force. The 5 dark green words, Lu Ya Heavenly Emperor runes, turned into a secret pattern. Along with the momentum, it carried the aura of the ancient emperor and lit up in Jian Wushuang's divine sense. This was the supreme enlightenment of the emperor. No one knew how powerful these runes would be. However, the word emperor was enough. An emperor represented the supreme, and the emperor's comprehension was naturally supreme. As the Lu Ya Heavenly Emperor runes continued to flow into Jian Wushuang's mind, he gradually became clear and understood some truths, especially his understanding of the cultivation realm. He knew that in the great Yen domain, the Yen Immortal had the meaning of transcendence, and above the Yen Immortal was the so-called Grand Yen Immortal realm. However, if one wanted to enter the Grand Yen Immortal realm, one had to comprehend the Immortal style in the Grand Yen Immortal realm. The so-called Immortal style was equivalent to a bridge, and once the construction was completed, it would lead to the Grand Yen Immortal. After entering the Grand Yen Immortal stage, it was further divided into 3 small realms, which were the 3 revolutions, 5 revolutions, and 9 revolutions. Of course, what shocked Jian Wushuang the most was that the emperor was also in the Grand Yen Immortal realm. The extremely mysterious emperor who controlled thousands of heavenly regions did not exceed the Grand Yen Immortal realm. This was something that Jian Wushuang had not expected. Each of Grand Yen Immortal's 3 transcendent revolutions was a heavenly chasm. A 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal could use Immortal styles proficiently, while a 5 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal carried the Yen Power Light Wheel and completely crushed any Grand Yen Immortal below 5 revolutions. Above 5 revolutions was 9 revolutions, which was Golden Crow Di Qing's current cultivation realm. His strength was unfathomable. After obtaining Emperor Lu Ya's comprehension and obsession, Jian Wushuang knew about the Emperor's fate energy, and that the Emperor's power was at the peak the Grand Yen Immortal realm. Even though the Emperor had not transcended the Grand Yen Immortal realm, he was clearly a different existence from the regular Grand Yen Immortal. Even Di Qing, who was a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, could only bow down in the face of the Emperor Lu Ya's obsession. In the end, it all came down to the existence of the Emperor's fate energy. An emperor was a title, the condensation of the common fate energy of countless heavenly regions. It had endless changes and had long exceeded the scope of the Grand Yen Immortal, but they were still within the cultivation realm of a Grand Yen Immortal. In Jian Wushuang's opinion, Grand Yen Immortal was the peak of all realms, and Emperor was the peak of that. After clearing up the problem between the cultivation realms, Jian Wushuang understood. At the same time, he no longer resisted the opportunities and obsessions that Emperor Lu Yalord had given him. My request isn't too much. Even if you don't want to be enemies with Jin Wuyang in the future, you can live on with my understanding and open up a territory in the Great Yen domain. As the last comprehension was teleported away, the lingering will of Emperor Lu Ya's apparition was extremely dim and could dissipate at any moment. Jian Wushuang looked at the emotionless emperor and bowed. I will. Emperor Lu Ya's obsession finally dissipated completely. On his deathbed, he left behind one last curse for Jin Wuyang's entire family. He wanted the emperor's death. After that, everything was silent. Perhaps he had died dozens of years ago, and it was because of his obsession that he had been able to hold on until today. The three emperors seemed to be indifferent to the death of their old friend. They poured all the wine in their wine gourds into the heavenly court to comfort themselves. Endless life, countless bloody battles, and their brothers and friends had long passed away. They had all experienced it and were sure that one day in the future, they would follow in their footsteps, so there was no need to be pretentious. The entire heavenly court was silent, as calm as it was before they arrived. The three emperors' true shadows smiled at him. Then they turned invisible and returned to the Boyang bottle. Slowly exhaling a mouthful of turbid breath, Jian Wushuang fell from the sky and sat on the ground as if he had collapsed. Chang Qing quickly came over. The excitement on his face could not be concealed. Brother Jian, your future cultivation path can be considered to be without worry. That was a personal gift from the emperor. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang shook his head with a bitter smile. The words Emperor Luya were still ringing in his ears. The Luya heavenly emperor runes could be comprehended and used, but it would definitely not be able to follow his path. This was a comprehension that belonged to an emperor. If he were to use it in the future, it would definitely affect his mind. This was also why Emperor Luya had said those words. Jian Wushuang knew the stakes, so he did not intend to comprehend it at the moment. The right arm that he had condensed was already intact, but if one looked closely, under the skin of the entire arm, a dark blue bird-like totem was drawn by the meridians, and it quickly disappeared. This scene in the heavenly court completely shocked them, especially Di Qing, who still could not believe it. However, soon, he came back to his senses and looked at Jian Wushuang with a complicated expression. Thank you for what you did just now. No need to thank me. I've already repaid your kindness. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Di Qing was slightly stunned, but he soon understood that the kindness he was talking about was that he had stopped Emperor Lu Ya's obsession at the most critical moment, giving Jian Wushuang a chance to escape. Di Qing smiled embarrassedly and then said no more. Jian Wushuang also did not say anything more. Di Qing had changed a lot from his initial resentment, vigilance, indifference, and today's talk. Just from the scene that had happened at the critical moment, Jian Wushuang felt that this guy was not as bad and untouchable as he had thought. He should be able to try to befriend him. After sorting out this relationship, he turned his attention to Heavenly Court. Now that the obsession of Emperor Luya, who was in charge of the Heavenly Court, had dissipated, the entire Heavenly Court had truly become an ownerless object. Just as Chang Qing and the others were about to make a move, a series of bell-like voices rang out outside the Heavenly Court. Trespassers of the Heavenly Court shall die. That familiar voice came from the three immortal bone guards in front of the Heavenly Court. Jian Wushuang immediately became alert. Chang Qing immediately frowned and said, "It can't be. We haven't been in here for long. And someone has already discovered this place? Could it be that some random Yen immortals accidentally barged into this place?" Very quickly, a large amount of aftershocks from Yen power battles spread from outside the Heavenly Court. It indicated that the situation was not as simple as they had thought. Let's go out and take a look. Jian Wushuang stood up and there was a surge of Yen power. His Yen power and cultivation level had been restored to their peak. As long as the enemy was not a grand Yen immortal, he was confident that he could annihilate them. Chun Qing and the others nodded and followed Jian Wushuang to the outside of the heavenly court. At this moment, outside the heavenly court, under the chaotic and lightless sky, everything suddenly became extremely bleak. The broken true sword, the dead body of Yen Immortal, and the violent Yen Power astral wind were all scattered in the abyss. The 3 immortal bone guards that had reformed from the abyss were also heavily injured. More than half of their immortal bones had been shattered, and the flowing treasure light had also been damaged. Even the sky seemed to be falling. Originally, there were close to 100 Yen Immortals fighting the immortal bone guards, but now more than half of them had been killed. Even though he had already died, Grand Yen Immortal's final obsession was still extremely terrifying. The explosion caused by their battle almost shattered the heavenly court and heavenly region that had been silent for countless years. This was a huge battle, and as Yen Immortals continued to fall, the 3 immortal bone guards were finally unable to hold on. The immortal bone guard that received the most attacks finally dispelled his obsession, and his immortal bones were torn to pieces by Yen Power. The half-dead Yen Immortals finally stopped their casualties and began to use their immense Yen Power to suppress the immortal bone guard. A total of 42 Yen Immortals separated and linked, forming 42 formation points. Unparalleled Yen Power flowed around them, condensing into a sky-covering formation, and completely sealed down. The 2 immortal bone guards in the array were constantly being weakened. The lustrous glow on their bodies was disappearing. In the end, they turned into dust and fell into the abyss again. The last 3 obsessions of the heavenly court had also dissipated. When the obstacles disappeared, the formation disappeared, and the 42 mysterious Yen Immortals landed on the broken square. In front of the 42 Yen Immortals, there was another Yen Immortal who stood alone. He had a mature look and had the aura of a superior. I didn't expect to finally find an ancient heavenly court after searching for several years. Looking at the vast and silent boundless heavenly court, the mature-looking Yen Immortal revealed a kind of excitement and infatuation. A thin, slightly wretched Yen Immortal stepped forward and said respectfully, "Congratulations to young master for obtaining this. You will definitely be able to ascend to the position of Grand Yen Immortal in the near future." The position of Grand Yen Immortal. The mature-looking Yen Immortal repeated in a low voice, as if he was very satisfied with this flattery. "Now that I'm here, if I can obtain the lost inheritance, the position of Grand Yen Immortal is nothing. Perhaps I can even grasp the Emperor's fate energy. When the time comes, which of those trash can stop me? Who else can I be controlled by? Your Excellency is right. We pledge to follow Your Excellency to the death." The short and vulgar Yen Immortal bent over and smiled. Yen Immortal, who had regained his senses, waved his hand and looked at the silent heavenly court. "Enter." 43 powerful figures with supreme force surging around them strode into the heavenly courts like stars surrounding the moon. "All of you, be on your guard. We can't let anything happen," the mature-looking Yen Immortal said in a deep voice. Then, facing the heavenly court's palace gate, which was more than 10,000 feet tall, he slowly retreated, letting the rest of the Yen Immortals walk in front. Facing such an ancient heavenly court, he was also nervous. After all, more than half of the 100 Yen Immortals he brought with him were killed when they were dealing with the immortal bone guards. If there were any more dangers in the heavenly courts, it would be extremely bad. The remaining 42 Yen Immortals were all elites. He was confident that even if something terrifying were to happen, he would be able to escape before all of them died. Under the combined efforts of the dozen leading Yen Immortals, the 10,000 feet long palace gate of the heavenly court slowly opened. There was no danger. It was as if everything had been silent for countless years. Seeing this, Yen Immortal, who was surrounded, quickly pushed aside the group and rushed in first. As far as the eye could see, the interior of the hall was dark green in color. It was like an ink painting of the heavens that was full of artistic conception, full of a vast and mighty aura. All of the Yen Immortals were shocked as they looked at the heavenly court in disbelief. Even though it had been silent for countless years, the heavenly court was still the heavenly court, an existence that they could not touch. Although they were all Yen Immortals, A heavenly court was the supreme hub of countless heavenly regions, and only the emperors could control it. Not to mention them, even Grand Yen Immortal wanting to ascend to the heavenly court and have an audience with the emperor was a luxury. Unless there was a grand banquet of the heavenly courts that was held once every year, they would not have any fate with the heavenly courts. Is this the heavenly court? All of the Yen Immortal's gazes were dull, as if the destiny of directly advancing to the Grand Yen Immortal had appeared before their eyes in the next moment. Their leader was performing much better than them, but he was no longer calm. His eyes were full of passion. "Let's go," he ordered in a deep voice and strode forward in the heavenly courts. Compared to the heavenly realm outside, the heavenly court was much darker. Even Yen Immortal could not see more than 100 feet away. With a wave of his hand, a Yen power light beam appeared to illuminate the area. The leader of the group frowned slightly. He felt that something was observing him in the dark, and he felt uncomfortable. For a moment, he shrank back into the group. In the entire boundless heavenly court, on the mountain and river pillars on both sides, there were strange birds that looked like they wanted to swallow people, which also exerted a layer of pressure on the Yen Immortals. However, they could only brace themselves and move forward. An immeasurable amount of heavenly fate, energy, and fortune was waiting for them. Just as the older Yen Immortal was nervously checking if there was any danger in the dark, the perverted Yen Immortal beside him subconsciously took in a cold breath. "My lord, there's someone in front." Everyone was stunned and immediately assumed a fighting stance. Yen Immortal looked over and saw several figures standing in the deepest part of the heavenly court through the dim light. In the center of these figures, there was a huge emperor's throne. An indescribable heavy pressure was surging. "You're acting mysterious," he gritted his teeth and said. "Follow me." 42 rays of light lit up and instantly lit up the surroundings. Even the position of the emperor's throne could be seen at a glance. When everything was clear, the air froze. On both sides of the emperor's throne, there were 4 burly men. The shortest among them was 9 feet tall, and the tallest one was more than 3 meters tall. Just by standing there, he looked like a divine peak. And in the middle of the 4 divine mountains, on the emperor's throne, sat an emperor dressed in a black feather robe. Although there was no sound, this scene was extremely shocking. All of the Yen Immortals held their breaths, not even daring to breathe. Are they dead or alive? At this moment, even the mature Yen Immortal was confused. His heart was restless. They should be dead. They couldn't have survived that great battle. No one could have survived. He began to convince himself in his heart. Even if they're not dead, after so many years, they must be extremely weak. In the next moment, the Supreme Emperor's body, which was sitting on the majestic Emperor's throne, opened its golden eyes. The mature Yen Immortal took in a cold breath and cursed. "Damn, he's alive!" The Emperor's body, which he had thought was just an empty shell, opened its eyes at this moment. He was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out. His body went soft and he almost fell to the ground. All of the Yen Immortals were shocked and took a step back, trembling. That kind of existence was not something they could imagine. Naturally, they did not have any desire to fight. As the figure in the Emperor's robe opened his golden eyes, the 4 figures around him also opened their eyes in unison. The general trend surged. The air seemed to have frozen. The 4 divine peak-like figures were unsmiling as they stared ahead. "My lord, let's retreat and leave." The vulgar Yen Immortal's legs trembled. His head was already heavy. In fact, the 4 figures were Chun Qing, Di Qing, Chun Xiu, and Cui Jing. Even the Emperor's true body sitting on the Emperor's throne in black feather emperor robe was Jian Wushuang's disguise. The reason why he did this was because he had no other choice. Originally, Jian Wushuang had planned to kill some Yen Immortals who had barged in by accident. However, he saw the previous scene as soon as he stepped out of the palace. The battle of close to 100 Yen Immortals was filled with energy. Even if more than half of them were killed, they would still be a huge effort. Other than Jian Wushuang, who had recovered to his peak after receiving Emperor Liu Ye's comprehension inheritance, the rest of them had not fully recovered. Di Qing, who had recovered 60% of his strength, was confused. so Jian Wushuang did not count him in. If they fought with the team of more than 50 Yen Immortals, even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory and not worth fighting. That was why he came up with this plan to drive away these Yen Immortals. But what he did not expect was that even though the group of Yen Immortal Gauls were about to burst from fear, they did not have any thoughts of running away. Jian Wushuang frowned and secretly glanced at Chun Qing, who was standing beside him. Chun Qing immediately understood. He took a step forward and shouted, "Those who trespass the heavenly court will die." The sound of thunder completely destroyed Yen Immortal's mental defense. "My lord, retreat and leave. If you don't leave, we'll all die here," the vulgar Yen Immortal said in a trembling voice. He was obviously planning to escape without a care. Yen Immortal gritted his teeth and did not speak. He was unwilling to give up on the heavenly court that he had only found by chance after so much hardship. Chang Qing, who was like a divine mountain, saw that they had no intention of leaving. He took a step forward and prepared to give them another warning. However, because he was too big, he snagged the wine gourd hidden at his waist, and more than 10 black mountain crystals fell to the ground. The wine gourd drew an arc on the jade floor and rolled to the feet of the old Yen Immortal. The air was suffocating. The older Yen Immortal looked down at the wine gourd by his feet, then at the black mountain crystals scattered on the ground, and he seemed to have understood something. "Are you all imposters?" Chun Qing was embarrassed and looked at Jian Wushuang. "Fight!" As the simple word rang out, Jian Wushuang suddenly stepped up from the emperor's throne, and an invisible sword had already formed in his hand. "Kill them!" Yen Immortal, who had recovered from his shock, shouted in anger. "Leave no one alive!" In an instant, 42 Yen Immortals, 42 rays of Yen power, surged and directly pressed down on Jian Wushuang and the others. Chang Qing directly slapped the true sword at his waist, bringing with it a tremendous amount of sword intent as he brazenly advanced. Chun Qiu also summoned his 8-armed Arhat and charged forward. Cui Jing, who was the weakest and did not have any trump cards, was blocked by Chun Qiu. Low lives. Di Qing also made his move. A black crow appeared behind him, chirping with its head held high. With such power, he was able to directly deal with the combined attack of 42 Yen Immortals. Clang! Whoosh! The blade of the sword was extremely sharp, and it directly tore apart the boundless Yen power. Di Qing's black crow, Chun Qing's sword intent, Chun Qiu's 8-armed Arhat. All of them exploded in the crowd of Yen Immortals. After destroying a Yen Immortal's immortal source with one strike, Jian Wushuang turned back to take a quick glance at Di Qing before continuing to fight. Even though he had only recovered less than 60% of his strength, the fearsomeness of a 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal was still revealed. The treasured image form of the Black Crow shattered, immediately shattering the immortal source of the 10 Yen Immortals. However, after this battle, the original 43 Yen Immortals were reduced by 20. The Yen Immortal, who was the leader, almost had his neck cut off by Jian Wushuang. "Your Excellency, please retreat." This time, the vulgar Yen Immortal did not finish his sentence. He looked at the invisible sword in his chest with his eyes wide open. Jian Wushuang did not stop after killing him. He held the hilt of the sword with both hands and slashed down with 3,000 sword intents. The older Yen Immortal's shocked eyes were filled with anger. Then, he shook his arms and the space around him suddenly changed. At this moment, it seemed to reflect a diamond-shaped 7-colored light, which was beautiful and fierce. At the same time, there were needle-like lights emerging from each diamond-shaped brilliance, and all of them rushed toward Jian Wushuang. It all happened so fast that Jian Wushuang could not dodge in time. Almost 1,000 rays of reflected light passed through his body. The indescribable pain of being cut seemed to have also shredded his consciousness. However, this only stopped Jian Wushuang for a moment. The invisible sword in his hand, due to inertia, finally hit the shoulder of the mature Yen Immortal. With a swish sound, the sharp sword intent almost cut him in half. He let out a blood-curdling screech as his shoulder blades shattered into pieces, and divine blood gushed out. Jian Wushuang retreated at the same time. He clutched his chest and divine blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. After coming to the great Yen domain, he had already cut off his mortal past. All his ancestor fate energy and divine power had been returned to the divine power universe, so he did not have the so-called immortal source. It was precisely because he did not have the most important immortal source that he managed to escape. He had a feeling that the mature Yen Immortal's move could destroy any immortal source. The older Yen Immortal, who was also heavily injured, staggered back. The Yen energy that was surging around him dimmed. Perhaps it was due to Yen power's rapid dissipation. The mature Yen Immortal's face began to change rapidly. The rather mature and square ordinary face disappeared and was replaced by a handsome face full of heroic spirit. After seeing the face clearly, Jian Wushuang's eyes became serious. That face belonged to none other than the third prince, Prince Yu, who had participated in the fight for the immortal peach in Zhen Wuyang's heavenly realm. However, his sudden arrival was obviously beyond Jian Wushuang's imagination. As the third prince of Zhen Wuyang, how could he appear here at this time? After the incident in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, the fifth son of Zhen Wuyang, Prince Mo, was killed by Zhang Ying under the Fusang tree. It had been less than 10 years since then, and the entire Great Si domain was probably in chaos. The other 6 sons would definitely be interrogated by Zhen Wuyang, and they would not act rashly. However, Prince Yu was leading his Yen Immortals to travel through the territory of the Great Sea region at this time. Wasn't he afraid of Zhen Wuyang's suspicion? And how did he discover this place? There was no answer to all his questions. Looking at the familiar face, Jian Wushuang had no intention of killing them all. Chongqing also saw Prince Yu's face at this moment. He cast a surprised and suspicious look at Jian Wushuang. "We can't kill him. It's Prince Yu." Jian Wushuang's secret voice was heard by Chongqing and the others. When Chongqing and Chunqiu heard this, they stopped fighting. Di Qing, who had originally planned to cook all of the 20 Yen Immortals in one move, stopped in time and let them go after hearing Jian Wushuang's words, although he still wanted more. The situation of this great battle came to an end, and the entire heavenly court fell into a strange dead silence. Such a destructive situation made the remaining Yen Immortals tremble. After these few exchanges, there were less than 20 Yen Immortals left. Prince Yu, who had stopped his injuries, did not have the courage and intention to continue fighting. Now, he only wanted to escape from this nightmare-like heavenly court. "Let's go!" Prince Yu's voice trembled. Then, with the support of more than 10 Yen Immortals, he left the heavenly court and disappeared. Looking at the heavenly court, which had fallen into silence again, Jian Wushuang slowly let out a breath of air. He had achieved his goal of driving Prince Yu away. He would never step into this place again before he grew to a certain level. He could not kill Prince Yu because he was the third son of Emperor Zhen Wuyang. If he killed them by mistake, Uncle Yu, who was powerful enough to kill Di Qing with a single palm strike, would probably come here with his men. Jian Wushuang, who had cultivated for millions of years, knew that it was best to be careful before he was strong enough. Since the 3 of them had been in disguise since they left the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, they did not have to worry that Prince Yu would recognize them. At this point, everything had come to an end. He fell into an unknown heavenly region from the coma in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture and was captured back to the Sand Demon Cave by Cui Jing. After several great battles, he brought out the mysterious heaven-reaching Buddhist realm and accidentally fell into this former heavenly court, where he obtained the Supreme Emperor's enlightenment inheritance. Everything was like a dream. Jian Wushuang was growing bit by bit, but he was also moving forward involuntarily. He randomly picked a jade step and sat on it, indicating for Chongqing and the others to quickly search. After all, Emperor Luya had already fallen completely. It would be a pity if his collection were to remain in the dust. Chongqing and the others could not wait to search. Only Di Qing did not move, but sat down next to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not ask about it. In his opinion, they would leave soon. By then, even if Di Qing completely occupied the heavenly court, he would not have any objections. But Di Qing's next words shocked him. "Can I stay by your side?" Di Qing smiled awkwardly, looking a little embarrassed. Jian Wushuang remained silent. He knew what had happened to Prince Mo. Perhaps guessing his inner thoughts, Di Qing hurriedly said, Don't worry. From now on, with me around, no one can touch you. In the end, Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked, Is it because of the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes? Di Qing was stunned and finally said, Yes, but not. Jian Wushuang understood what he was thinking and continued to say, I can tell you the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes word for word, but not now because I haven't understood it yet. If that's the reason you want to stay by my side, then I'll understand it as soon as possible and tell you everything without leaving out a single word. Please leave quickly. I don't want to place an uncertain danger by my side. After saying this, Jian Wushuang slowly walked out of the heavenly court with his hands behind his back. Looking at his back, Di Qing's eyes revealed a strange look. Then, as if he had made up his mind, he quickly followed. Are you planning to make me your slave? Di Qing came to his side and asked. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and said, I've never thought about that. What's the use of having a slave? You approached me because of the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes, so I will naturally give you what you want. Before that, you can choose to stay by my side, but we have no relationship. After Di Qing heard this, he could not help but ask, But you don't plan to ask for equal benefits? I'm too lazy to ask for it, Jian Wushuang said indifferently. I can give it to you, but I hope you know, whether it's now or in the future, don't do anything that will harm me. After a moment of silence, Di Qing said solemnly, I understand. Jian Wushuang did not say anything more. He looked around the dark, heavenly region with his hands behind his back. 3 days later, Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, and the others ran out of the heavenly court, their faces full of joy. Although the heavenly court was broken and silent, without any fate energy of the great Tao, the Emperor's treasures were still unimaginable. There were countless rare treasures, Immortal techniques, and even a mental cultivation technique of Emperor Luya, which was taken out by Cheng Qing, filling up an entire storage ring. Even Cui Jing, who had been in a state of sorrow and confusion from the beginning to the end, was a little excited. He returned to his unruly look. He was just a small ancestor realm cultivator, but he had experienced such a big scene. How could he suppress his excitement? However, after collecting such a rich collection, it was already on the agenda for Chun Qiu and Cui Jing to advance to the Yen Immortal realm. Let's go, Jian Wushuang said. He looked back at the crowd and took the lead to leave the ancient heavenly court. After passing through the mysterious vortex, 5 figures stood in the air. Jian Wushuang waved his hand to release yen power and completely sealed the upturned corner of the void. The heavenly region of the past, which should not have been exposed, would continue to sleep until time immemorial. After doing all this, everything was done. He turned his eyes to Cui Jing, who was by his side. Cui Jing subconsciously took half a step back and looked a little timid. He felt an inexplicable pressure when facing Jian Wushuang. Even his big sister, Sha Qing, and those grand Yen Immortal monks who easily destroyed the Sand Demon Cave did not possess that kind of pressure. The indescribable breath was as deep as the abyss and as tall as the mountains. It was impossible to grasp. Jian Wushuang did not try to guess what Cui Jing was thinking. He did not hate the last person from the Sand Demon Cave who was also full of karma and killing tribulation. However, he could not say that he liked him either. You're free now. You can go wherever you want to go, Jian Wushuang said indifferently. Cui Jing was stunned when he heard this, and his eyes revealed a touch of bitterness. The Sand Demon Cave was destroyed, and he was sick and injured. Where in this vast heavenly region could he find a place to stay? He had nowhere to go, but he did not dare to go against Jian Wushuang's words. He could only stand there blankly. Chun Qiu saw through Cui Jing's thoughts and nudged him discreetly, then gave him a look. Cui Jing understood what he meant and hurriedly looked up at Jian Wushuang. Brother Jian, I can't go anywhere. Can I just follow you? From now on, I'll obey you. Jian Wushuang did not agree. He just said, We'll make plans after you've recuperated. It's too early to say anything now. After saying this, Jian Wushuang stopped driving him away. When Cui Jing heard this, he was overjoyed. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said, Thank you, Big Brother Jian. After taking one last look at the sealed heavenly court, Jian Wushuang turned around and disappeared into the vast void with the 4 figures. In this battle to the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, Prince Mo had died, and the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture had been destroyed. The heaven-patterned bone armor, which had been almost in his hands, had also completely disappeared. In fact, there were many suspicious points about the great turmoil in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture this time. From the moment Jian Wushuang and the others entered the Celestial Prefecture, there were mysterious top cultivators and Yen immortals selling black mountain crystals on the streets. Then, the mysterious 7 swordsmen appeared and completely disrupted the situation. They wanted to kill Prince Mo in the hall of the small Celestial Prefecture. What puzzled Jian Wushuang the most was that Zhang Ying, the absolute beauty he had saved during the Great Voyage, had also beheaded Prince Mo and crushed his immortal source at the last moment under the Fusong tree. In just a few days, a prince had been killed. All the killing intent seemed to be at the same time, but it also seemed to have been planned. There were so many things that even Emperor Zhen Wuyang would find it hard to find out how complicated the situation was. However, there was one thing that Jian Wushuang could be sure of now. Zhang Ying was definitely not on the same side as the 7 swordsmen. She was like a ghost, approaching with a strong purpose. Once she succeeded, she would disappear completely. However, if they were not working together, it would be too much of a coincidence for them to attack Prince Mo on the same night. Now, only one of the 7 swordsmen was left. It was the heroic-looking woman who had disguised herself as a man. She had once hung on the wall of the Sand Demon Cave together with them, but now, she had long disappeared. He was afraid that only by finding her would he be able to ask what had happened in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Lady Yinling, who was wearing the heaven-patterned bone armor, the heroic-looking woman who was the last one of the 7 swordsmen, and Zhang Ying, who had cut off Prince Mo's head. Now that all 3 of them had disappeared without a trace, they added a few more mysteries to the already destroyed Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Even if the surface of the water was calm, no one knew what kind of undercurrent was stirring under the water. When he came, he only had Chen Qing and Chun Qiu with him, but when he returned, he had Di Qing and Cui Jing with him. Jian Wushuang did not know what to say about the 2 guys he kept by his side, so he could only wait and see. They were deep in the boundless void, and countless heaven regions and planes were like stars in the universe. However, this was only within the Great Sea region. To the entire unknown Great Yen domain, it was just a drop in the ocean. After some thought, Jian Wushuang decided to return to the 6 Heavens realm. No matter what, that was the place where he was currently staying. It was also the closest place to the supreme heavenly court of the Great Sea region, and perhaps he could obtain more ancient secrets. Jian Wushuang had already made up his mind. After he returned to the 6 Heavens realm to recuperate, he would do his best to search for the whereabouts of Lady Yinling. Then, he would head to the so-called heaven-reaching Buddhist realm to see if he could resolve his own karma and great killing tribulation. Jian Wushuang felt that the unknown heaven-reaching Buddhist realm was definitely not simple. Kong Tong and Kong Ji, the 2 grand Yen immortals, were too murderous and did not have any understanding of the monk. Perhaps there will be more monks like Kong Luan in the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. The 5 figures shuttled through the void and continued to fly toward the vast void. When he came, he carried a shoulder full of broken snow, and the world was vast. When he returned, there was nothing in his hands, but it was silent. Those who had already become Yen immortals avoided the mortal world. But with Chun Qing, this wine barrel, it was destined that their return journey would not be so peaceful. After all his pleading, Cui Jing's eyes lit up and he finally managed to convince Jian Wushuang. Then, he stopped at a heavenly region with abundant yen power to rest and drink. This heavenly region was vast and had more than a dozen continents. It could be considered a super heavenly region in the Great Sea region. And in the past, Yen immortals were not rare. There were Yen immortals who were still reluctant to cut off the mortal world, like Chun Qing, who descended to the mortal world to drink. However, Yen immortals were in the minority, and there were not many peak cultivators. They went to a random restaurant in a continent and entered it. Jars of aged wine were brought up one by one, and there were more than 100,000 tons of wine. Cui Jing, who had the same bad taste as Chun Qing, began to compete with each other in drinking. Jian Wushuang was holding an exquisite wine pot in one hand and sitting by the window. He looked at the street outside the window with his deep eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. Di Qing, who was not interested in the vintage wine, was secretly sizing up the guy sitting opposite him. Di Qing always felt that he carried a lot of secrets, but he was very clear and clean, which was an unspeakable contradiction. Who cares? It won't be too late for me to leave after I get the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes. Di Qing thought so, and then looked out of the window leisurely. He had been silent on the Fusang tree for many years and was curious about everything. If it was not for Jian Wushuang's restraint, he probably could not wait to destroy a few heavenly regions for fun. Just as everyone was lazily walking, the streets, which had many top cultivators hurrying along, suddenly became empty. Then the sky darkened. Boom! Several extremely powerful auras descended like dark clouds. For a moment, all the top cultivators within thousands of miles were silent. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Then, he waved his hand and the yen power boundary protected the entire restaurant. Rumble! It was the sound of the earth being torn apart. Following that, one pavilion after another collapsed and shattered. In the center of the violent explosion, only a restaurant remained standing. It did not even suffer the slightest damage. Cui Jing, who was drinking, could not help but tremble when he saw the scene outside. However, when he saw Jian Wushuang sitting by the window, still looking lazy, he inexplicably felt at ease and continued to drink. Brother Jian, do you need me to investigate? Chun Xiu asked in a low voice, already prepared to fight. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang shook his head and said, No, the troublemakers are here. As his voice fell, the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground was heard. Run! Why aren't you running anymore? A thunderous roar resounded. Outside the broken street, two extremely thin figures fell into the rubble. A yen immortal that looked like a vajra threw two figures into the ground. An irrepressible muffled groan sounded. Behind this yen immortal, there were another 5 yen immortals, all of them with sinister expressions. Damn you, aren't you good at running? Pulling back his feet, the vajra-like yen immortal clenched his fist in the air and directly grabbed the thin figure's neck, lifting him up from the ground. Ah! His dirty hair covered his face, but it could not hide his pain. Sticky blood flowed out of the wounds on his skin. Be brother, I'm scared. Another even thinner figure was lying on the ground, his hands helplessly pushing away the gravel, as if he wanted to use it to stand up. The thin figure who was being strangled slowly calmed down, and his bloodshot eyes were lifeless. Let my brother leave, I'll go with you. When the vajra-like yen immortal heard this, it was as if he had heard the funniest joke. He laughed. A piece of trash like you dares to discuss conditions with me? Come back with me. No one will be able to escape. With that, he waved his other hand and grabbed the two thin figures in his hand as if he was pinching ants. Trash like you are only fit to be medicinal catalysts. When the thin figure heard this, his originally lifeless eyes suddenly narrowed. Then, like a wild beast, he opened his mouth and bit Yen Immortal's ear. Bang! A powerful palm smashed into his face. Blood gushed out of his 7 orifices, and he fainted in an instant. The vajra-like Yen Immortal laughed in disdain. He picked up another figure and was about to leave. In the next moment, an extremely cold female voice resounded through the shattered earth. Release them. Jian Wushuang looked toward the source of the voice and was surprised. The one who spoke was a woman in a gray robe. Her face was not gentle and beautiful, but she was full of heroic spirit and exuded a sense of majesty. This heroic-looking woman was one of the last 7 swordsmen who had wreaked havoc in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. They met several times in the Sand Demon Cave, but he did not know where she went. But now they actually met again in this heavenly region. It was simply unbelievable. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly and wanted to see what she would do next. After shouting that sentence, the heroic-looking woman was not afraid at all. A powerful yen power was already circulating around her body. The vajra-like yen immortal, who was carrying a thin figure in each hand, stopped in place and slowly turned his head. When he saw that it was a woman, his violent eyes were filled with desire. I was wondering who it was, so it's a little girl. The Vajra-like Yen Immortal threw the two figures in his hands to the Yen Immortal behind him. Then, he rubbed his palms and walked toward her without any fear. A look of disgust flashed in the eyes of the heroic-looking woman. Then, with a thunderous momentum, a long sword shot out without any warning. Yen Immortal's eyes focused, and his neck subconsciously tilted to the side, barely dodging the terrifying attack. However, there was a long and narrow wound that almost cut his neck in two. It was just that, in this one exchange, he had been severely injured. This made him both shocked and angry, and at the same time, he waved his hand to suppress it. The sky suddenly caved in, and an invisible giant palm smashed toward the heroic-looking woman. She frowned, and like a ghost, with an unimaginable speed, she rushed to the front of the Vajra-like Yen Immortal. The Vajra-like Yen Immortal was shocked. He took a few steps back and shouted, "Crush her!" As he shouted, the 5 Yen Immortals behind him moved. With the combined power of 6 Yen Immortals, an unparalleled Yen power prison appeared. The terrifying force once again caused the ground to crack. The heroic-looking woman, who was originally moving at an extremely fast speed, was also affected. It was as if she was in a quagmire, and she found it difficult to move. To fight 6 Yen Immortals alone was impossible even if she was at her peak, let alone in this state. The 6 unparalleled forces descended and made her spit out blood. Even if she wanted to, she was powerless to reverse the situation. "Little girl, you actually dared to hurt me. Today, I will make you beg for death." A roar came from the Vajra-like Yen Immortal's mouth. Yen power chains surged from his palms as he once again tried to capture the heroic-looking woman. However, at the next moment, a lazy voice suddenly sounded. "You're really noisy." He subconsciously turned his head to look at the source of the sound, only to see a pitch-black urn smashing straight at him. Bang! An extremely muffled sound rang out, and the thick fragrance of the wine spread in all directions. The jar directly tore apart the combined attack of the 6 Yen Immortals and heavily exploded on the face of the Vajra-like Yen Immortal. Then, he fell to the ground with his head raised and fainted. With just a casual strike, he made a Yen Immortal lose the ability to resist. What kind of outlandish means was this? With an exquisite wine pot in one hand and a 3-foot sword in the other, Jian Wushuang walked forward slowly, free and unrestrained. The 5 Yen Immortals took a few steps back at the same time, looking at him with vigilance. The heroic-looking woman clutched her chest and slowly stepped back. She looked at Jian Wushuang with shock and disbelief. "Who are you? It's best if you judge the situation and do not have any more conflicts with my Li Fire sect. We will let bygones be bygones for the matter just now." One of them, a clean-faced Yen Immortal, was shocked by Jian Wushuang's power, but his words were not polite. After all, in his opinion, no matter how powerful Jian Wushuang was, he could not possibly fight against 5 of them alone. However, very quickly, he swallowed this thought into his stomach, and his eyes widened to their maximum. This was because he saw 4 figures that were as tall as divine peaks walk out of a restaurant not far away and stand behind this young man in order. Each figure was as deep as the abyss and as tall as the mountain, filled with an overbearing aura. In particular, the aura exuded by the luxuriously dressed figure with 8 noble feathers in his hair had already exceeded his imagination. A conflict? Li Fire sect. Jian Wushuang looked at him and raised his eyebrows slightly. "You think you're worthy?" Immediately, the 5 Yen Immortals were humiliated. The Li Fire sect, which they were proud of, had taken in disciples across several heavenly regions. Although it was nothing much in the Great Sea region, the top cultivators in the surrounding heavenly regions were all proud of being able to enter the Li Fire sect. But now, he was being humiliated without any regard for his face. The clean-faced Xianxia suppressed his urge to attack and said in a low voice, "Juniors, it's best if you don't act too rashly. We might meet again in the future." Jian Wushuang gave him a sidelong glance and then attacked. An unparalleled yen power rose and crushed the yen immortal lying on the ground into powder, leaving no immortal source behind. All the yen immortals were shocked. They never thought that Jian Wushuang would kill a yen immortal without any warning. "Leave the two boys here and I'll let you go." Jian Wushuang looked at them and said indifferently. The clean-faced yen immortal suppressed the anger in his heart. Knowing that he had met a tough opponent today, he immediately left the two thin figures behind and turned to leave. The 5 yen immortals were like 5 beams of light, ready to leave this world without any hesitation. However, things did not always go as he wished. Jian Wushuang raised his hand and threw the true sword to Chen Qing. Chen Qing understood tacitly. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a sinister smile, and his figure disappeared. To cut the weeds and eliminate the roots to prevent future troubles. This was his principle of doing things. After a short while, screams could be heard from the sky. Jian Wushuang did not care about that. He carried the wine pot and slowly walked forward. Finally, he stopped in front of the two thin figures and squatted down. "Raise your head and look at me," he said in a low voice. The dead fish-like figure moved with great difficulty. Then, as if he had exhausted all its strength, he raised blood-stained head. Thank you, Your Excellency." After he said that, he passed out. Shaking his head helplessly, Jian Wushuang stood up and looked at the heroic-looking lady, who was standing not far away with a complicated expression. "Let's leave together. I have a few questions for you. Don't even think about running away. You can't run away." With Jian Wushuang's protection, there was only one restaurant left on the vast land. At this moment, in the main hall of the huge restaurant, 8 figures were sitting around a round table. Jian Wushuang sat in the middle, and Di Qing and the others sat beside him. The heroic-looking woman had also taken her seat, and she would glance at him from time to time. The 2 emaciated figures were sitting opposite Jian Wushuang, staring at the dishes on the table. "Let's eat," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. After receiving the order, the 2 figures did not care about anything else and directly started to swallow. "These 2 kids, it looks like their hair hasn't even fully grown, right? What are you doing out here?" Chen Qing looked at the 2 with some surprise. Jian Wushuang was also a little curious. The 2 boys in front of him did look a little immature. Moreover, their faces were almost identical, as if they were twins. "Hee, brother, it's delicious." The one with the most tender face, who was also a little silly, was holding a plate of food in his hand and laughing foolishly. Another kid with a determined look and a bit of honesty nodded his head and quickly stuffed all kinds of food into his mouth. These 2 skinny kids had finished all the dishes on the table like a tornado. However, more and more dishes were presented to them, and there was no limit to their appetite. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. He just watched the 2 of them eat with interest. Although these 2 were not even ancestor realm cultivators, they both had some foundation in their realms and should not be so dependent on food. However, looking at the way they ate, it was as if they had never had a full meal. After an unknown period of time, the 2 guys who were feasting like crazy finally stopped. He subconsciously touched his stomach and stood up hurriedly. He cupped his hands at Jian Wushuang and said, "Thank you for your good fortune. We have never had a full meal. Today is the first time. We are very grateful." The other kid with a silly look chuckled at his brother, then repeated what he had said. "You haven't had a full meal since you were born?" Chen Qing was slightly surprised. The skinny figure nodded and said frankly, "We brothers are all alone. Since we could remember, we only had each other to rely on. Naturally, we couldn't have a full meal." Chen Qing asked again, "Then why didn't you guys stay at your original place? Why did you run around?" The skinny man scratched his head and said, "My brother is a fool with a chaotic mind. I really want to get his brain checked for problems." Such childish words made everyone present smile. Hee, brother said I'm an idiot. So I'm an idiot." The kid with the silly look started to laugh foolishly again. As his brother had said, this kid was indeed a fool with a chaotic mind. The thin figure scratched his head again and finally said solemnly, "My name is Song Wuxin. My brother's name is Song Wuyan. I would like to thank you for saving my life, and I will never forget it." Where are you going to take him to check? Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked. The thin figure named Song Wuxin shook his head and said, There was an experienced and knowledgeable old cultivator in the place where I used to live. He said that my brother's mind had yet to develop its spiritual wisdom and there was no way to change it. However, I didn't believe him. I have to find an immortal and ask him to treat my brother. The immortal that Song Wuxin was talking about was Yen Immortal. Looking at his hopeful face, Jian Wushuang could only sigh in his heart. The innate spiritual intelligence had yet to develop and was in a state of chaos. In other words, such a life should not have appeared in the first place, but it was born due to various opportunities. It was an extremely pure white paper. This white paper that should not have been born was innately missing, and it was probably very difficult to make up for it. Even if he used some kind of supreme secret technique to make up for it, it would still cover up the original memory. However, at least for now, even Di Qing, a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, was helpless. In the end, Jian Wushuang still said, What if I say that the immortal can't cure your brother? Song Wuxin was stunned. A hint of disappointment flashed in the corner of his eyes. However, he soon grinned and said, If one immortal can't cure him, I'll find another immortal. I'll keep looking until I find an immortal who can cure my brother. Jian Wushuang asked again, Are you going to continue without a goal? Song Wuxin nodded. That's right. Keep walking forward until you find it or until you can't move anymore. Are you not afraid of death? Chengqing asked. Song Wuxin grinned again. For people like us, it's a blessing to be able to live one more day. Life and death are not things we can consider. Besides, sometimes, death is not necessarily a bad thing. Chengqing immediately shook her head. See that? 2 idiots. The 2 of them appeared extremely ill at ease in front of this group of figures with strength as deep as the abyss. They clutched the corners of their clothes and did not know what to say. In the end, it was Jian Wushuang who said, This journey is not as simple as you think. If you can't even protect yourself, your end will not be any better than what you have today. If it wasn't for us, you and your brothers would have lost your lives long ago. Would you still be alive now? If you don't even treasure your own life, then I advise you not to bring your own brother to die with you. Hearing Jian Wushuang's words, Song Wuxin trembled and his eyes were filled with bitterness. I also want to live with him, but I'm born with a dull talent, and my control of yen power is weak to the extreme. I can't deal with the possible crisis at all. Jian Wushuang said indifferently, Since you're not talented enough, you'll have to make up for it later or change it in other ways. Do you want to practice the sword? When Song Wuxin heard this, he hurriedly took out the short sword that looked like a fire stick from his waist. He scratched his head in embarrassment and said, I'm not particularly proficient in the way of the sword. I picked up this sword a long time ago for self-defense. Jian Wushuang picked up the short sword and pulled it out of the scabbard. The blade was so worn out that it might not even kill some ordinary beasts in ordinary heavenly regions. Let's just throw this sword away. He did not even raise his head as he spoke. Then, he looked at Chun Qiu and said, Chun Qiu, see if there are any true swords. Chun Qiu nodded and began to rummage through his storage ring. When Chengqing, Chun Qiu, and Cui Jing were in the heavenly region, they had almost emptied out Emperor Liu Ye's heavenly court's treasures. They had almost filled up an entire storage ring. Soon, Chun Qiu took out a black true sword without a scabbard from his storage ring and handed it to Jian Wushuang. The true sword was warm and not cold. The body of the sword was black, and only the words Tianji was engraved on the hilt. It was a true treasure sword that was not weaker than Chun Qing's sword. Catch! Jian Wushuang threw the true sword, Tianji, to Song Wuxin. He was shocked. Even if he was slow-witted, he knew the weight of the true sword in his hand. For a moment he was speechless. If you want to cure him, you must first make yourself strong. Jian Wushuang looked at him with golden light in his eyes. Song Wuxin swallowed his saliva and hugged the true sword tightly. Since then, they had not left this heavenly region for 7 days. The reason was that Jian Wushuang had been teaching Song Wuxin the most basic sword moves and comprehending sword intent. Brother Chun Qiu, I thought that Brother Jian was unapproachable, but now it seems that he's rather approachable. Do you think he'll tell me if I ask him about any cultivation problems in the future? On the roof of the restaurant, Chun Qiu looked at Cui Jing and smiled. I'll tell you about this kind of problem. You'll know after getting to know him for a long time. Brother Jian is not a cold person. He will take care of the people around him. Cui Jing nodded and looked thoughtfully at the imposing figure who was just standing there. The light in the depths of his eyes became more and more determined. 7 days passed by in a flash. When the thin figure was surrounded by wisps of mist, he slowly opened his eyes. Let's go, he said. Jian Wushuang was concise. After saying these 2 words, he turned around and prepared to leave. Song Wuxin kneeled on the ground and kowtowed more than 10 times to his back. Song Wuyan, who had a dazed look and only knew how to smile foolishly, saw his brother kneel down and quickly knelt down as well. He also kowtowed more than 10 times. My lord, I, Song Wuxin, have been wandering for half my life. No one has ever done me any favor or made my brother suffer all kinds of hardships. I have received your kindness of a meal, a sword, and a thought. Song Wuxin has nothing to repay you with. I hereby swear that in 10,000 years, no matter what the result is, I will rush to your side. I am willing to be your pawn for life. Heaven and earth will be my witness. Jian Wushuang did not turn around. He just released the yen power breeze to lift the 2 brothers up. Don't think too much about it. I only did it on a whim, and I don't expect anything in return. As for you guys, let's talk about it after you survive. With that, Jian Wushuang left slowly without stopping. Song Wuxin subconsciously took a few steps forward, but he stopped in his tracks. Then he bent down and carried Song Wuyan on his back, and flew towards the corner of the sky. Although he had stayed in this heavenly region for 10 days, it was just an instant. During this time, the heroic-looking woman had slightly recovered from her injuries and was about to escape. However, with Di Qing, Chan Qing, and the others guarding her, she was unable to escape. Tell me, why did you go to the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture? Jian Wushuang asked calmly with his hands behind his back. The heroic-looking woman's expression was cold, but there was inexplicable anger in her eyes. You'd better answer honestly, or else you won't end up any better than the previous Yen Immortals. Chang Qing coldly threatened. The heroic-looking woman snorted. Even in the face of Jian Wushuang, Di Qing and others, she was not afraid. If you want to fight, do it quickly. There's no need to waste your breath. This is not your style not long ago. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang frowned. If you answer me honestly, I'll let you off this time. Did you 7 swordsmen go to the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture to kill Prince Mo? She said coldly. Don't you think that you're asking a stupid question? Do you think I'll answer? Motherfucker, I'm going to teach you a lesson. Chang Qing shouted angrily and raised his hand to teach her a lesson. But then, Jian Wushuang stopped Chen Qing and said to her, I'm not interested in whether your goal is to kill Prince Mo or not. I'm more interested in the power behind you. How strong can it be that your goal is to kill the prince? The heroic-looking woman's body trembled, and a trace of panic flashed through her eyes. You can leave now, Jian Wushuang said, and then signaled her to leave. She was stunned, obviously not expecting him to let her go so easily. However, the heroic-looking woman did not hesitate too much. Her figure flashed as she prepared to leave. Just as she was about to leave, a voice made her stop in her tracks. Jian Wushuang suddenly realized something and asked, Have you seen a girl with bells all over her body? As soon as she said that, a trace of anger flashed in the eyes of the heroic-looking woman. Isn't that bitch with you? You've seen her before? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, I have. Not long ago, she tried to kill me. She thought I was dead and disappeared after taking my things. Where did she go? Jian Wushuang asked, his heart beating like a drum. This time, she did not stay any longer, and her figure disappeared. It was impossible for Jian Wushuang to remain calm when it came to the heaven-pattern bone armor. Just as he was about to give chase, a soft but clear voice rang in his ears. Great me heaven! The 3 words were imprinted in Jian Wushuang's mind. causing him to frown. It was another unknown place. And was Ling there with the heaven-patterned bone armor? It was simply wishful thinking to search for a person aimlessly in the vast Great Sea region. However, with a possible location, all the goals were shortened. Although he could not confirm whether the heroic-looking lady's words were true, Jian Wushuang had already made up his mind to go to the so-called Great Mi Heaven to investigate. After all, the heaven-patterned bone armor in Ling's hands was extremely important to him. In the endless Great Yen domain, the heaven-patterned bone armor was the closest clue to Xianxia so far, and it was likely to hide a big secret. Therefore, he had to collect as many bone armors as possible. After making up his mind, Jian Wushuang did not stay there any longer. He took everyone back to the Six Heavens realm. The Great Sea region, which was opened up by Emperor Zhen Wuyang, had gone through countless years of battle and swallowed up several emperors from ancient times and their territories. It had become so vast that few emperors' territories could compare to it. Even for Yen immortals, traveling through the heavenly regions was a time-consuming task. Therefore, there were some arrays set up between some super-heavenly regions, which could lead them to the designated place through the power of the immortal marks. However, this kind of formation had the flaw of instability, so it was rarely used by Yen immortals. They relied on their own power to travel. After several years, the familiar Six Heavens realm came into Jian Wushuang's sight. He looked back at the four godly figures behind him and then stepped into the Six Heavens realm. Perhaps it was because of the great changes in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, the heavenly regions controlled by the young emperor was completely clean. There were almost no signs of any living beings. Looking in the direction of Big Lonely Heaven, Jian Wushuang hesitated for a moment and finally decided to return to Little Lonely Heaven first. However, when he entered Little Lonely Heaven, the small purple-robed companion of the young emperor seemed to have been waiting for a long time and directly came to greet him. "Master Jian, the young emperor has been waiting for you for a long time. Come with me." He nodded at Jian Wushuang and then walked forward to receive him. A group of 5 figures rushed towards the central hall of Little Lonely Heaven. As the clouds and mist dispersed, Jian Wushuang arrived in front of the hall and looked at the square in front of the hall. There, a thin and weak figure was sitting cross-legged. The young emperor, who was extremely pale, opened his eyes as if he had sensed something. When he saw Jian Wushuang, he stood up to welcome him. However, before he could take 2 steps, he fell back to the ground. The skinny purple-robed man hurriedly helped him up. "Brother Jian, I knew you would come back," he said weakly. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, "Are you okay?" The young emperor shook his head. "I'm fine. I've been whipped too many times. They're just some superficial wounds." The skinny purple-robed man added. Because of the 5th prince's matter, the emperor was furious and investigated thoroughly. The other princes were whipped thousands of times for various reasons. The young emperor looked at him and said in a low voice, "Brother Jian, Prince Mo is dead." Jian Wushuang nodded silently. "I know. I was there." He was slightly stunned. "Brother Jian, do you know who killed him?" Jian Wushuang replied, "I don't know. It was a mysterious person who destroyed his immortal source." "Then, Brother Jian, have you found the heaven-patterned bone armor that you need?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and said, "The clue disappeared again. Let's not talk about this for now. You've been rushing all the way. Go into the palace and rest first." The young emperor looked at the 2 unfamiliar figures behind Jian Wushuang and asked, "Who are these 2? "They are 2 like-minded friends I met on the road. They are temporarily staying by my side." The young emperor did not ask any more questions and led Jian Wushuang and the others into the hall. Prince Mo's death has caused more than half of the Great Sea region to fall into a grave atmosphere. Although Imperial Father has not carried out a thorough investigation, I'm afraid that there will be no peace in the heavenly regions for a long time. Sitting beside Jian Wushuang, the young emperor analyzed, "Brother Jian, if the news or clues of the heaven-patterned bone armor are cut off, it's better to be idle for a while. It's the safest." What the young emperor said was true. On the way back to the Six Heavens realm, the atmosphere in the heavenly regions was heavy and there was a sense of undercurrent. However, Jian Wushuang could not wait. Once Ling left the so-called Great Me Heaven, the clue of the heaven-patterned bone armor would really be cut off. He had already decided that after resting for a period of time, he would go to the Great Me Heaven to find Ling. The young emperor's voice rang out. Not long after Prince Mo's death, Imperial Father summoned all of us to the heavenly court to investigate everything about Prince Mo. It was also at that time that there were irrepressible rumors that I was the one who killed Prince Mo, because a lot of black mountain crystals appeared in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture before it was destroyed. Because of this, I was whipped 4,000 times. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was moved. He thought of the group of top cultivators who were peddling Black Mountain Peak crystals in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture when he first entered. Even Chun Qiu had almost died at the hands of a mysterious Yen Immortal. The Black Mountain crystal that was flowing in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture was definitely being sold by someone on purpose. There was only one possibility for the Heavenly Court and Jin Wuyang to know about this. Someone had spread it on purpose. In the end, they had obviously achieved their goal. All the blame for killing Prince Mo was now on the young emperor. Jian Wushuang did not intend to hide anything. He immediately told the young emperor what he had seen and heard in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. In other words, as soon as you entered the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, there were already people setting up a situation to frame me? What a good plan. The young emperor's eyes were cold, and he was really angry. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, I'm sure that those guys have been planning this for a long time. It seems that after failing to kill me, you've turned to kill the other princes. He sneered. What a good plan. The young emperor asked again. Speaking of which, you just said that Prince Mo died in the hands of a mysterious woman? Jian Wushuang nodded, but he did not say Zhang Ying's name. To have such power to kill Prince Mo so easily, Brother Jian, why don't you make a guess? Who sent these people? The young emperor looked at him and said meaningfully. In fact, after the complete destruction of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, he had some doubts. There was only one possibility that could mobilize 2 Grand Yen Immortals and 7 Peak Yen Immortals and set up a situation where the disaster was directed to the east. It was the killing between the princes. The young emperor smiled. It seems that you've guessed it, Brother Jian. However, without evidence, no one can guess which of us it is. The only thing I'm pissed off about now is why the one who died wasn't Prince Zhou. This kind of confusing situation could not be explained with just a few words, let alone a final conclusion. Otherwise, the Heavenly Court would have found out who the real murderer was. Jian Wushuang did not intend to continue the topic. After all, it was meaningless. After thinking about it for a while, Jian Wushuang made up his mind. He looked at the young emperor and said, Do you know who is in charge of the heavenly region in the Great Me Heaven? The young emperor raised his eyebrows and looked a little strange. Brother Jian, why do you ask? Jian Wushuang said, Because I got the news that the heaven-patterned bone armor is very likely to be in the Great Me Heaven. He said profoundly, You must be familiar with this Great Me Heaven. It's the heavenly region under the second prince, Prince Zhou's jurisdiction. Great Me Heaven is under the control of Prince Zhou? Jian Wushuang frowned. The second prince, Prince Zhou, was the one who had been defeated by Jian Wushuang in the fight for the peach in the heavenly realm. From a certain perspective, it would be a very troublesome matter to have an opponent like Prince Zhou. From his style of doing things, as well as his extremely meticulous personality, he was a very difficult opponent. More importantly, he had an endless stream of methods. Whether it was light or dark, he could inadvertently deal a heavy blow to his opponent. Originally, Jian Wushuang had planned to reduce the conflict with him after the fight for the Immortal Peach. But now, he knew that the place that Ling might go to was the heavenly region that was under the control of Prince Zhou. It was even more troublesome now. He was afraid that he would be killed immediately if he appeared in Prince Zhou's heavenly region. At the same time, Jian Wushuang felt strange. Ling was Prince Mo's woman, so why did she escape to Prince Zhou's heavenly region? Seeing that the heroic woman did not seem to be lying when she left, the news about the heaven-patterned bone armor was very likely true. Brother Jian, are you planning to go to the Great Me Heaven? No, I don't agree to this, the young emperor frowned and said. At this point, Even if you can reach Great Me Heaven safely, it's very likely that Prince Zhou will discover you immediately. Once he finds out, I'm afraid. Jian Wushuang was also worried about this. Prince Zhou was definitely not an easy person to get along with. He might even be terrifying. If they were discovered in the so-called Great Me Heaven, it would definitely be a situation where they would fight to the death. However, he had no way out. One of the main reasons why he had come to the Great Yen domain was to find Xianxia and Old Master. He had to untie the secret that had been binding him. At the same time, there were also secrets about Taichu Divine World and the Divine Power Universe. As his own realm grew, the Divine Power Universe, which he had thought had no secrets, actually had some secrets. Why did the gods that he had met in the Land of Sorrows, who had existed for an unknown amount of time, fight? Who was the old man? Shi Ting, who appeared like a graceful swan and guided Jian Wushuang forward. Why did he disappear without a trace? And the polar sea that did not belong to the Divine Power Universe. Why was Old Man in the Divine Power Universe? The most important point was what kind of existence Divine Power was, and whether the universe he had once been in was a reincarnation. He could only find out about this after he found Xianxia and Old Master. The heaven-patterned bone armor was his only clue, and he could not let it go. Even if the person in charge of the Great Me Heaven was Emperor Zhen Wuyang, he had to go. I've already decided. No matter what, I'm going to go. Jian Wushuang looked at the young emperor and said, You really want to go? I really have to go. Then I'll go with you this time no matter what. Jian Wushuang shook his head. In order to avoid being exposed, I plan to travel alone. It will be a waste of time if there are too many people. But isn't it more dangerous if there's no one to take care of each other? The young emperor frowned. We'll talk about it when the time comes. I plan to rest for a while, Jian Wushuang said. But no matter what, you can't go with me. If we are discovered, the problem will be more troublesome. The young emperor also knew the pros and cons of this. In the end, he sighed helplessly, got up, and patted his shoulder. Brother Jian, take a good rest. I'll discuss some things with you later. As the young emperor and the others left, Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, and the others who had been eavesdropping outside the hall, rushed into the hall. Brother Jian, you're going to that Great Me Heaven? If you take me, Chun Qing, with you, I'm sure you'll be fine. Even if young master asks me to come, I'll have to bow my head. Chun Qing grinned and said excitedly, Brother Jian, I'll go with you too. We can look out for each other. Chun Qiu added. Since you're all going, I'll follow. Cui Jing agreed. Jian Wushuang was helpless. Calm down first. This time, it's not like the time in the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. I'm going to face Price Zhou. Besides, I'm going to look for something, not for revenge. Chang Qing, your figure is too prominent. Chun Qiu, if I'm not wrong, there's an immortal source between your brows. You should be breaking through to the Yen Immortal realm soon. Just stay in Little Lonely Heaven. At this moment, Di Qing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, This time, I'll go with you. Jian Wushuang looked at him as if Di Qing was the most suitable candidate. As a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, he could easily crush any ordinary Great Yen Immortal. With Di Qing's guarantee, only the Heavenly Court could touch him. Then, Jian Wushuang nodded and confirmed the candidates who would go to the Great Me Heaven this time. He had decided that Chang Qing would stay in the 6 Heavens realm. As Chun Qiu and Cui Jing had eaten quite a number of supreme grade pills sealed by Emperor Luya along the way, they had advanced to different degrees. It was only a matter of time before they became Yen Immortals, so the 2 of them were left to guard. Jian Wushuang only decided to bring Di Qing along with him on this trip to the Great Me Heaven controlled by Prince Zhou. After making his decision, he went to the square outside the hall to recuperate and recover. Chun Qing and the others also went into meditation to regulate their breathing. Ever since the destruction of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture, they had suffered extremely serious injuries, so much so that they had not fully recovered their strength even after returning to the 6 Heavens realm. If Jian Wushuang had not obtained Emperor Lu Ya's comprehension inheritance, his power would definitely not have recovered to its peak. Although he said that he was recuperating and recovering, He was actually starting to examine the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes that was sealed in his body and in his divine sense. Di Qing followed him closely, the desire in his eyes almost overflowing. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. He did not care about Di Qing and started to investigate the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes. Di Qing also became nervous and concentrated, even more nervous than him. At that moment, Jian Wushuang, who had looked like an old monk meditating, suddenly said slowly, "What is your relationship with Prince Mo?" Ah! Di Qing was stunned for a moment, and then he responded after a moment of contemplation. Actually, we can be considered to have some kind of beneficial relationship, but we are far from being friends. After all, we are both taking what we need. At this point, Di Qing touched his nose awkwardly. He wants my protection, and I just want some of his imperial father's fate energy. Prince Mo's imperial father? Why do you need the fate energy of Zhen Wuyang? Jian Wushuang looked at him and said. Di Qing did not hide anything. Every 1 year, Prince Mo will give me a wisp of Emperor Zhen Wuyang's fate energy for me to comprehend, but the effect is minimal. I'm still stuck at the rank 9 and can't comprehend the mysterious Imperial Emperor's fate energy. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang said, "Above the 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal is the Emperor?" Di Qing shook his head. Emperors belong to the Grand Yen Immortal realm, but the Grand Yen Immortal is by no means equal to the Emperor. It can even be said that they are two completely different existences. To become an Emperor, one has to comprehend and derive one's own Imperial Emperor fate energy. Only then can one create the heavenly court and control the Daos of countless heavenly region. I've been trapped as a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal for a long time, so long that I've almost forgotten the past. Fatigue flashed across his eyes. If I didn't tell you, you probably wouldn't have believed me. I'm actually from the same era as the Great Sea Region's Emperor, Zhen Wuyang. But when he was a 5 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, he comprehended and derived Imperial Emperor's fate energy, while I have been trapped in 9 revolutions for countless years, but I have still been stagnant and have not been able to sense even a trace of fate energy. He sighed as he said this. Jian Wushuang understood a little after hearing it. He said slowly, "In the end, the cultivation is about the comprehension and control of the way of heaven and fate energy. These mysterious things can't be comprehended by talent. The only thing you can do is to comprehend and be appropriate. Although what I said is a little empty, it is the truth. Your Tao and your fate energy might appear in your heart one day in the future." Di Qing was silent. He began to reflect on the meaning of Jian Wushuang's words, as if he was thinking about something. Jian Wushuang did not say anything more. He fell into deep thought and started to work on the Emperor Luya's runes in his divine sense. Luya Heavenly Emperor runes were the last comprehension inheritance of Emperor Luya. It was impossible for Jian Wushuang to not be tempted. He had a feeling that even if he comprehended just a little bit, it would be an earth-shaking change for his current situation. However, comprehension was not like treating a guest to a meal. It was only natural for a guest to have a meal, and there were unknown variables involved. This was the first time Jian Wushuang had come into contact with a great Tao that belonged to an emperor. Naturally, he was extremely nervous. In his divine sense, the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes showed a unique brilliance, making people feel a sense of respect and pilgrimage, and even more revealing an ancient aura. Jian Wushuang turned into a phantom and walked in his consciousness. After tens of millions of years of cultivation and growing step by step from insignificant to present, his consciousness had long reached perfection at Ancestor Realm, becoming a constantly changing sky-sea. With his vast and boundless divine sense, he could go to any corner he wanted in an instant. The Luya Heavenly Emperor runes occupied more than half of the space in his divine sense, and it looked like a sleeping bird in the clouds. The closer he got to the comprehension, the more unbearable the heat swept over him. It burned the clothes that Jian Wushuang's shadow was wearing, revealing his solid chest. After the arm that was severed by the Luya Imperial Emperor was remade, a terrifying aura surged out from the skin of his entire arm, as though dark green blood was flowing. At the same time, Jian Wushuang also felt that the ancestral phoenix blood that Feng Qi, the matriarch of the Phoenix clan, had left in his body in the divine power universe, had become full from its original weak state. Everything seemed to have been done by the Luya heavenly emperor runes. Jian Wushuang's chest was bare, and his long hair that was tied behind him had been untied. It was flying in the air, and the brilliant divine patterns were flowing in his hair. He walked forward slowly, facing the dormant cloud with the power of the ancient world, and reached out a finger to touch it. In an instant, the mountains and seas were destroyed, the great sun withered, and the entire divine sense was set off with a great momentum. Then, the hazy cloud materialized into a flying bird. The dark green bird had 6 horns on its head, each of which was a different color, beautiful and mysterious. It opened its eyes, and its pure golden pupils seemed to see through Jian Wushuang in an instant. Their eyes met, as if they were separated by an entire era. There was a desolate and ancient aura that he could not bear. He felt that every cell and pore in his body was under a heavy pressure and began to break apart. Return to where you've come from. This is not fate that you can control now. You can only have it when the great catastrophe is coming. The bird with 6 horns and millions of feathers looked at Jian Wushuang and said. At that moment, Jian Wushuang could be considered to be suffering in silence. He stood still on the spot and could not move at all. His entire body was completely captured by the aura. Wisps of comprehension aura that were like wisps of mist all wanted to enter his body without caring about anything. At this moment, he could not run even if he wanted to. At the same time, Jian Wushuang's real body suddenly emitted an unimaginable and terrifying fate energy. Di Qing, who was sitting beside him, was shocked. Then, Di Qing came back to his senses, and his eyes were burning. At that moment, there was an unknown aura surging around Jian Wushuang. It was extremely intimidating, and it was the same aura as the Emperor Lu Ya's aura in the heavenly court. Di Qing was trying to suppress the restlessness in his heart, but soon the desire in his heart forced him to reach out to Jian Wushuang. Just one aura, just one wisp of aura. He mumbled and then approached Jian Wushuang's true body. The next moment, his face turned purple as he felt the true power in his meridians being absorbed by an unknown force. At the same time, his meridians could not withstand the tearing and were collapsing. As a 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal, his immortal body was almost at the peak, but he could not withstand this power. This power could only be the aura of an emperor. Jian Wushuang, quickly wake up! Di Qing roared, and divine blood gushed out of his pores. Jian Wushuang, who was in his own divine sense, was also suffering at the moment. He could not control his body at all and could only let all kinds of auras enter his body. The 6-horned bird could not stay calm either. Its golden eyes shot out a brilliant golden power and instantly cut off the strange suction force on Jian Wushuang's true shadow. After that, the bird opened its beak and spat out a power, directly driving him out of the divine sense sky. When Jian Wushuang's true shadow completely disappeared, the flying bird fell silent again. The flowing light that was emitted by the Lu Ya heavenly emperor runes slowly circulated. After leaving the divine sense sky, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and swallowed the yen power. He felt a sharp pain in his deified soul, and then he passed out. Beside him, Di Qing's breath was extremely weak. So unfortunate. This coma lasted for a full year before he woke up. Jian Wushuang, who originally thought that there would be future trouble, woke up and found that he had not suffered any injuries. Instead, he was full of yen power, and his cultivation realm had fallen to the peak of the yen immortal realm. However, Di Qing's aura was a little weak, as if he was slowly recovering from a serious injury. Jian Wushuang did not care. Since the Lu Ya heavenly emperor runes were not something he could touch at the moment, he might as well not touch it. Instead, he prepared to go to the great Mi heaven. Are you all right? How did you end up like this? He looked at Di Qing, who was in low spirits, and asked curiously. Di Qing shook his head repeatedly. I'm fine. I'm just slightly injured. Jian Wushuang nodded and stopped asking. He spent the next few days preparing. Chun Qiu selected a total of 1,000 supreme-grade pills from the Emperor Lu Ya's collection and placed them into his storage ring. Brother Jian, you must take these with you. They are all the best items that the three of us have selected from our collection. Every single one of them has heaven-defying effects. Jian Wushuang nodded and accepted it. This trip to the Great Mi Heaven where Prince Zhou was located would definitely be 100 times more dangerous than the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture where Prince Mo was. According to Prince Zhou's calm and cautious character, he would have probably surrounded the entire Great Mi Heaven like an iron bucket. These supreme-grade pills from Emperor Lu Ye's collection might play a critical role at some point in time. Also, Brother Jian, since we can't follow you to the Great Mi Heaven this time, we won't be idle either. Chun Xiu, Chun Qing, and Cui Jing chatted with Jian Wushuang. The three of us are planning to set up an auction house outside the Six Heavens realm. An auction house? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What? You guys still need money to spend? Can you guys finish spending all those Black Mountain Peak crystals? Chun Xiu scratched his head. Opening an auction house in these heavenly regions to sell some things is just one of the aspects. More importantly, it's bartering. We found too many precious treasures in that ancient heavenly court, but rather than keeping nearly half of them, we might as well exchange them for some treasures that can benefit you, Brother Jian. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang finally understood that the auction house that Chun Xiu, Chun Qing, and Cui Jing wanted to set up was all for him. He shook his head and said, Chun Xiu, I have no problem with you setting up an auction house, but remember not to take out too many treasures at one time, in case you get involved in unnecessary trouble. Also, there's no need to do it for me. You can use the treasures that you've obtained through bartering. The most important thing now is to improve your own strength. Chun Qing grinned. Brother Jian, don't worry. I will be in charge of the construction of the auction house this time. It will not rely on any heavenly region. When the time comes, I will call some of my old brothers over to guard it. Even if Emperor Zhen Wuyang comes over, he will have to pay the fee for his entry. Chun Xiu chuckled and added, Brother Jian, no matter what, you'll be the owner of our auction house from now on. Jian Wushuang did not know whether to laugh or cry. All right, I'll do as you say. 10 days later, Jian Wushuang left for the Great Mi Heaven with Di Qing. When he was about to leave the Six Heavens realm, the young emperor gave him a ring of gold and jade. Then he exhorted, Brother Jian, you must remember that the Great Mi Heaven is not like the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. Prince Zhou has always had the heart of a mighty lord, and his means are 100 times more powerful than Prince Mo's. I've also heard that there's a Grand Yen Immortal under him. Even if the situation is urgent, you must not fight with him in the Great Mi Heaven. Jian Wushuang took the ring and nodded. Okay, I'll keep it in mind. The young emperor took another step forward and said in a deep voice, Brother Jian, if anything happens to you in Great Mi Heaven, I will definitely bury Prince Zhou with you. Jian Wushuang felt a little uncomfortable and said, Don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll come back as soon as I find it. The young emperor nodded. That ring will be of great use at critical moments. Try not to use it unless it's absolutely necessary. He nodded, and then with Di Qing, they turned into 2 streaks of light and flew into the void. Your Highness, we should go back. The skinny purple-robed man nodded. The young emperor did not answer. His eyes were solemn. After a long while, he said, My companion, who do you think the person beside him is? I don't know. However, I'm sure that those who can accompany Jian Wushuang are definitely not ordinary people. Is that so? Why do I feel like he's so familiar? It's really strange. Violent squalls roamed in the void, capable of even tearing apart stars. Only Yen immortals could withstand the astral winds for a long time and travel around the universe. There were 2 figures that crossed billions of miles of void space in an instant and wandered in the boundless territory. They were Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. Jian Wushuang was completely at a loss about the entire Great Sea region. Di Qing was obviously not much stronger than him. Although he lived in the same era as Zhen Wuyang, he had experienced something that made him not understand the entire Great Sea region at all. This time, without Chun Qing leading the way, Jian Wushuang only knew the general location of the Great Mi Heaven but did not know where the shortcut was. Why don't we try the so-called teleportation array? Jian Wushuang looked at Di Qing and said, A teleportation immortal array? Could it be a formation that Jin Wuyang built before the War of Annexation? Di Qing pondered for a moment and said, "Yes, I believe in that kind of immortal array. It was once used as a hub to communicate with the military forces of various heavenly regions. As long as the immortal pattern is complete, it can carry nearly 10,000 cultivators." Jian Wushuang nodded. "Then let's give it a try." In order to hide their whereabouts and not be suspected, they traveled at high speed from the Six Heavens realm for nearly half a year before they arrived at a remote heaven domain with a teleportation immortal array. Looking at the 10 or so top cultivators who were guarding the immortal array formation and sleeping soundly, Jian Wushuang stomped his foot in the void. Suddenly, Yen Power's power rose and lifted the 10 or so top cultivators up. "Who is it?" A young top cultivator, who was the leader of the group, woke up from the void with a dusty face. "Hey, kid, where can your immortal array reach?" Di Qing asked in a deep voice. Because Di Qing's facial features were too three-dimensional, even if he did not release Yen Power, he only needed to frown to reveal a terrifying aura. The top cultivators, who had originally planned to suppress the two of them with their numbers, had inexplicably become well-behaved. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang threw a small bag of Black Mountain Peak crystals to him. The young leader's eyes immediately brightened, and the unhappiness on his face disappeared. "Yes, my lord. Our vast sea immortal array was built by the Grand Yen Immortal under Emperor Jin Wuyang. It has a long history, and I guarantee that you can go anywhere you want. You can go to the heavenly regions such as Tianyi Heavenly Region, Luohai Heavenly Region, and the Great Pure Silence Heavenly Region." "Stop, stop, stop. Tell me if you can reach the Upper Desolate Heavenly Region." The Upper Desolate Heavenly Region was a heavenly region that was close to the Great Mi Heaven, but no one made any connections with it. Jian Wushuang had asked the young emperor and the others during the trip, so he naturally knew it by heart. The Upper Desolate Heavenly Region, that's a place that no cultivator has been to for a long time. A short top cultivator reminded him, but he was immediately glared back by the young top cultivator. Then, the young top cultivator quickly stuffed the Black Mountain Peak crystal into his pocket and nodded. "If you want to go there, of course we can go. Don't worry, my lords. Just stand in the center of the immortal array, and you'll be there as soon as you open my eyes." Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other and then walked into the immortal formation. This immortal formation was close to the heavenly region in the form of a formation eye. It stood in the void and gave off an ancient halo. In the formation eye of this immortal formation, there were close to 100 thick immortal runes flowing. It was not bad. "My lords, stand firm." The young top cultivator in the lead shook his arms, and a powerful force turned into a stream of light and poured into the immortal array. With the combined power of 10 top cultivators, the ancient immortal formation rotated and the immortal marks flowed. Then Jian Wushuang and Di Qing disappeared. "Pant, pant." The young top cultivator panted heavily. "Boss, I'm afraid it's a little difficult to go to Upper Desolate with this array. The immortal patterns shouldn't be able to hold on," the short top cultivator said with a worried look. The young top cultivator continued, "Nonsense. They definitely won't be able to reach the Upper Desolate. The immortal array's immortal pattern is already half broken. Can we teleport that far? If that immortal formation breaks in the middle, I'm afraid they'll all be seriously injured. I knew it. I threw them to the nearest heavenly region. They can't stand it. They will get lost. And I don't think they know the Upper Desolate is in a mysterious place. I can't sleep and eat well if I don't make a profit from them." As the flowing light in front of them dissipated, the two figures stood in a rather mysterious mountain and water. "So fast? I don't think it's even been 10 breaths." Jian Wushuang was a little shocked. The immortal formation was too fast. Di Qing was also a little surprised. Such speed was really good. Jian Wushuang came back to his senses and looked at the mountain forest in front of him, which was full of yen power and had a mysterious landscape, in confusion. According to the young emperor, the Upper Desolate, which was close to the Great Mi Heaven, was a barren land with endless flying sand and stones. The weather was terrible, and even yen immortals were unwilling to stay there for long. It was the main battlefield where Emperor Zhen Wuyang fought with another emperor. The power of the emperor turned the entire heavenly region into a desolate place. In the end, the victorious Zhen Wuyang rebuilt the heavenly region and named it Upper Desolate. However, this heavenly region was completely different from the Upper Desolate heavenly region that the young emperor had described. Could this really be the Upper Desolate? Jian Wushuang was a little confused, but no one could answer him, because Di Qing was also confused. It seems like the environment here is quite good. There should be peak cultivators or yen immortals living here. Let's find some cultivators and ask them first. Jian Wushuang made up his mind and then asked Di Qing for directions. The 4 wild mountains and rivers blend well together. The water and grass were abundant. It was a rare, secluded, heavenly region. Just as Jian Wushuang was searching for traces of cultivators, the clouds in the sky suddenly darkened. At the same time, the forest that had been like a paradise suddenly dimmed due to the changes in the clouds, and a cold wind blew. What's the situation? Jian Wushuang frowned and then signaled Di Qing to hide his aura. Not long after they concealed their auras, strange laughter rang out from all directions and finally gathered in the forest. Hee. As this strange laughter resounded, a moment later, more than 10 strange figures appeared in the forest. Each of these strange monsters was tall and burly. Each of them was several feet tall, ugly, and black all over, with eyes and thick canine teeth turned out at the same time, like a skinned monkey. These 10 or so ugly figures were all jumping forward. Even their ugly faces could not hide the smug smiles on their faces. If one looked carefully, they would see that the reason these ugly figures were jumping forward was because they were carrying a wedding carriage in the middle. The wedding carriage was as red as blood, appearing extremely strange in the dark forest. Jian Wushuang, who had completely hidden his aura, saw this scene and could not help frowning slightly. Then he looked at Di Qing. Di Qing understood and immediately released a great burst of yen power. At this moment, a whimpering sound that seemed to be struggling rang out from the wedding carriage. The whimpering sound was obviously made by a woman. At the same time, it was accompanied by the sound of kicking, which caused the entire wedding carriage to shake. However, the giant-like figures with ugly faces did not care at all and continued to jump forward happily. "Help me!" Sob, sob. A muffled voice came from the carriage. Was the bride kidnapped? Jian Wushuang looked at the ugly figures and frowned. "I'll kill him directly. I'll find out what's going on later," Di Qing said. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. He could tell that these ugly figures were not good people almost immediately. The special power that they exuded was not like yen power, but it also had an aura that made people uncomfortable. Then, Di Qing stretched out his hand and waved it, and an irresistible yen power spread out. The dark forest around them brightened up in an instant under the impact of the gilded yen power, and even the gloomy sky cleared up. The dozen or so ugly figures were only at the ancestor level, so how could they resist Di Qing's yen power? Before they could even react, they were burned into smoke. The palanquin fell to the ground with a bang and fell silent. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing immediately revealed themselves from the forest. The ugly figures that had been directly burned into green smoke condensed from the ground again, as if the sand had gathered into a tower. They were puzzled and scratched their heads. Then they looked around with their big eyes and happened to meet the eyes of the 2 people who had just appeared. All of a sudden, all of the ugly figures roared in rage, and their thick canine teeth grew several times longer. Even their bodies, which were more than 10 meters long, began to be surrounded by a dark aura. They were furious and strode over to crush Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. However, Jian Wushuang did not even look at them. He pointed his finger forward and yen power, as heavy as the mountains and seas, flowed out from his finger. It turned into thousands of magnificent silk ribbons and strangled them all. Strange. Why didn't I kill them just now? Di Qing was puzzled. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to speak, he heard another sound from the ground. Wisps of black smoke rose from the ground and formed a tower of sand, then transformed into more than 10 ugly figures. There were 12 figures in total, and none of them were missing. One should know that Jian Wushuang's attack was enough to suppress a Yen Immortal to the point where he could not even lift his head. However, it did not affect them at all. The 12 ugly figures were even more furious, and they rushed over with a terrifying force. Jian Wushuang frowned and pointed his finger again. Yen power, which was several times more terrifying than before, surged out and cut them into pieces again. Not even a trace of aura was left. What are these things? They're even harder to kill than Yen Immortals. Di Qing also frowned. Although these guys were so vulnerable, their continuous resurrection still made the two of them curious. As expected, the 12 ugly figures condensed again, but this time they were a little dim. At this moment, a head popped out from the curtain of the bridal carriage. It spat out the ball of red thread in its mouth and shouted in a hurry, "They are all nightmares. You can't kill them. Run." Nightmares? This is getting interesting. Jian Wushuang laughed as he had already thought of a countermeasure. This time, he did not kill them directly. Instead, he released Yen power to form a cage and trapped the 12 figures inside. He kept pulling them away and consuming them. The so-called nightmare was an extremely special energy. They were born without a physical body, because they were imagined by people in their sleep, and they only existed by relying on some mysterious medium. This was also why Jian Wushuang and Di Qing had not been able to kill them. However, Jian Wushuang could tell that there was a limit to their power. As long as they were trapped, the nightmare would naturally dissipate. As expected, the nightmare taper that was trapped in Yen Power's cage became even dimmer. They were no longer alive after repeatedly gathering and dispersing. The eyes of the girl who had poked her head out of the bridal carriage lit up when she saw the scene of so many nightmare terrors being killed. Even though her hands and feet were tied up by the red rope, she still jumped out of the carriage and fell heavily on the ground. "Aya?" She felt the pain, her brows furrowed slightly, and her thin lips pursed. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other and then walked towards her. It was said that a woman's most beautiful day was when she got married and put on makeup. The woman in front of him was even more so. She was dressed in a bright red silk dress. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her lips were like a little bun. Although her cheeks were flushed, it was still difficult to hide her heroic spirit. In particular, there was a sesame mole on the corner of her mouth, which added a little liveliness and agility. As soon as she saw the two of them walking towards her, she immediately nodded excitedly. "Miss, is this place called Upper Desolate?" Jian Wushuang, the leader of the group, asked. At the same time, he waved his hand and untied the red rope on her. The girl saw the light in Jian Wushuang's eyes and quickly saluted. "Thank you for saving me, sir." Jian Wushuang waved his hand and repeated his question. "Upper Desolate? This is Qingzhou," the young lady said, somewhat puzzled. "Qingzhou? What is this place? Is this a capital in the Upper Desolate?" Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, and a vague intuition came to their minds that they seemed to have been tricked. After another round of urgent questioning with the woman, he finally came to a real conclusion. They had really been scammed. The woman in front of him was not an ordinary woman. She was the only daughter of the biggest sect in the Qingzhou. She had visited several heavenly regions before and naturally knew some of their names. The heavenly region that Jian Wushuang and Di Qing were in was actually called the Green Domain. It was a completely different heavenly region from the Upper Desolate, which was close to the Great Me Heaven. Damn thing. They actually dared to scam me. Di Qing was furious, and a terrifying yen power spread out. "Alright, at most, we'll just look for it again. It won't take long." Jian Wushuang comforted him. The girl's bright eyes rolled, and then she looked at Jian Wushuang and asked, "Master, are you going to Upper Desolate?" Jian Wushuang nodded without hiding anything. "That's great. I just happened to know." Before she could finish her sentence, the surrounding mountains, rivers, and forests suddenly trembled. The earth was torn apart and the mountains collapsed. It was a scene of destruction. At the same time, the sky darkened, and he could not see the palm clearly. The lady's expression changed. "It's the Demon Lord. Nightmare Demon Lord is here." As her voice fell, there seemed to be some kind of unknown suppression falling from the sky, quickly swallowing and covering everything. Even the thick ancient trees could not withstand the heavy pressure and were shattered on a large scale. It was as if something that had been sleeping for ages had awakened. As the canopy that covered the sky shattered, a lustrous dark sky was revealed. At the same time, the wailing of a bugle horn resounded in the wilderness. "Sir, let's go. This demon lord is devouring a cultivator's mind. His intelligence is the most powerful. If we are not careful, we will become his slave." In the hazy gray darkness, a lady in a red silk dress urged them, "I know the way. Please leave with me, my lords." Jian Wushuang stood still and looked at the sky. The aura was quite special and thick, surrounding the three of them and blocking all their escape routes. Then, two huge eyes as bright as the moon appeared. They were so clean and clear that they could reflect all things. A moment later, the two giant eyeballs suddenly produced hundreds of millions of pitch-black threads, and at the end of the threads, they finally condensed into an extremely strange shadow. That shadow was extremely hazy, as if it was formed from a mixture of various unknown substances, looking extremely strange. It had two huge and clear eyes, which looked like two round wings. Such a so-called demon lord was only in the Yen Immortal realm, so Jian Wushuang was naturally not afraid. "You're just pretending to be mysterious. Are you afraid of showing your face?" Jian Wushuang was already in a bad mood, so he released Yen power and struck out with his palm. A full power attack belonging to a peak Yen Immortal was unleashed without holding back, smashing towards the strange shadow in the air. "Lowly slaves, all of you must submit to me." The shadow spoke the truth. In the face of Di Qing's attack, it obviously did not bother to dodge. In the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. The shadow with an overbearing aura was slapped down from the sky by Jian Wushuang's palm and smashed into the ground, stirring up dust. The lady was shocked. She covered her mouth with one hand and looked at the scene in disbelief. The nightmare demon lord that had made more than half of the Qingzhou submit and tremble had been slapped into the ground by this young man who was extremely handsome? That was a demon lord in the Yen Immortal stage. However, Jian Wushuang did not think that way. The so-called nightmare demon lord, other than using some kind of bewitching method to erode the state of mind of ordinary top cultivators, his real body was even worse than an ordinary Yen Immortal. What was even more unfortunate was that Jian Wushuang's divine soul had already reached perfection when his divine power universe reached Ancestor Realm. It was far beyond Nightmare Demon Lord's level. Even if he stood still and let the demon eat away at his heart realm, he would only return empty-handed. Naturally, Jian Wushuang did not bother to use any other tricks and directly destroyed it with one palm. The extremely dense black gas in the sky instantly dissipated, and the two huge moon-like eye wheels were blinded by Di Qing. "Lowly servant, how dare you, how dare you!" Before he could finish his sentence, Jian Wushuang slapped Nightmare Demon Lord again and sent him into the ground. "You're noisy," Jian Wushuang frowned. It was just a nightmare that was born from greed. It was not worthy of his time. Since they knew that this was not the upper desolate heavenly region, he and Di Qing did not plan on staying any longer. They turned around and prepared to leave. "My lords, please wait." A cry rang out. It was the girl wearing the dress who was trying to ask them to stay. When she saw him turn around, her cheeks became even redder. She reached out to tie her hair and bowed stiffly. "My name is Xianxia. Thank you for saving my life. I can't repay you. I hope." Jian Wushuang did not want to wait for her to finish. He waved his hand and planned to leave. "Hey, can you listen to me? I'll finish my words," the girl called Xianxia said in a sweet voice. "I know about the upper desolate heavenly region that you guys are talking about." Jian Wushuang stopped and looked at her again. He said with uncertainty, "Do you really know?" Xianxia raised her eyebrows proudly. "Of course. My father is the sect master of the #1 sect in Qingzhou. He has countless resources. I traveled to various heavenly regions with my father back then." He pondered for a moment and then said, "In that case, can you tell me the approximate location of Upper Desolate? Is it important for you to go to Upper Desolate?" "I guess so. That's good. Since you saved me, For the sake of this little girl's life, I've decided to take you there personally. There's no need for that. The journey is dangerous. No, I have to bring you there. That place is extremely desolate and hidden. Even if I tell you the general location, you won't be able to find it. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other and could not make up their minds. Right at this moment, the illusory shadow that was almost shattered by the two slaps crawled out from the ground and prepared to escape. Qingqi saw this clearly and hurriedly said, "My lord, you can't let him escape. He's a great danger." Jian Wushuang nodded and with a wave of his hand, he took the demon into his hands and squeezed it into the size of a pellet with yen power. Qingqi was once again shocked by this method. The demon lord, who was on par with her father, was actually being toyed with by this man. "Let go of me, you lowly servants. You will regret this." The demon lord, who had been compressed into the size of a pellet, was furious. He seemed to know no fear and kept shouting. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to put it out, Qingqi suddenly stretched out two hands and caught his palm. Her eyebrows curved into crescents. "Master, can you give this to me? I plan to feed it to my dream-eating tapir." Jian Wushuang pulled back his hand and threw the demon lord to her. "Thank you, my lord," Qingqi said happily. Then, she untied the red ribbon on her hair and tied up the demon lord, who was the size of a pellet. "Are you going to take us to the upper desolate?" Di Qing interjected and asked. Qingqi nodded repeatedly. "Of course. You won't be able to reach the upper desolate without my guidance." "Shall we leave now?" Jian Wushuang said. "There's no rush. You guys follow me back to the sect first. I plan to bring some things with me before we set off," Qingqi said. Then, she changed her previous attitude of a little girl and began to run in the forest with large strides. "You guys, quickly follow me. How troublesome. I'll catch those damn things sooner or later and skin them alive," Di Qing said angrily. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly, then followed Qingqi with Di Qing. As the mysterious mountains and rivers were left behind, the number of cultivators gathered on the surrounding land also began to increase. After traveling for less than half a day, the sect elders and a group of disciples who had come to find Qingqi appeared in front of them. "Uncle Li, you guys are finally here." Qingqi's face was filled with anger. "If you had come a little later, were you planning to go to the demon's lair to find me?" The elder known as Uncle Li had a calm expression and held a jade staff in his hand. After hearing her complaints, he smiled bitterly. "My little ancestor, we've all been trying our best to find you. We'll definitely find you in less than half a day." Qingqi snorted, then picked up the red ribbon tied to the demon lord and shook it. "I've already caught this guy. Let's return to the sect." Uncle Li was stunned. Before he could calm down, the figure in Qingqi had already swept into the distance like a graceful swan. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing followed him. On a misty mountain, there were more than 100 chains that cut across the mountains, connecting the sects on each peak together. It was a majestic sight. This was the most famous sect in the entire Qingzhou. It was called the Xianxia Pavilion. Almost half of the cultivators in the Qingzhou Yevonli region were proud to cultivate in the Xianxia Pavilion. This was because the sect master of the Xianxia Pavilion was a powerful Yen Immortal, and he had more than a dozen powerful disciples who had entered the Yen stage. No matter which heavenly region he was on, he was an existence that dominated. The great mountain-guarding formation that enveloped the entire Xianxia Pavilion also showed its transcendent status. Although the mountain-guarding formation could be easily destroyed by Jian Wushuang, he still restrained his aura and prepared to enter the mountain gate of Xianxia Pavilion with Di Qing. However, immediately after, more than 10 disciples who were guarding the mountain flew out from the dark and stopped them. Xianxia Pavilion is an important place. Outsiders are not allowed. A bunch of stupid things. Can't you see that this lady invited an important guest? Qingqi turned around and scolded angrily. "It's all right, Miss Xi. We won't go in. We'll wait here for a day. If it's really inconvenient for Miss Xi, we'll take our leave," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. He took a few steps back and waited quietly. Okay. I'll go with you after I get my things," Xianxia said hurriedly. Then her figure flashed and she directly entered the mountain gate. Looking at her figure, Jian Wushuang had a premonition that something was off. Why can't I go? I must go today. Inside the Xianxia pavilion, Xianxia stood on a mountain rock and shouted angrily with her hands on her hips. She had already changed from her red makeup to a plain shirt. You dare ask me to lure out the nightmare demon lord? And now you don't dare let me travel outside our heavenly region? Nonsense. Xianxia, hurry up and come down. A middle-aged man in a white robe, who had a myriad of brilliance hidden within him, shouted angrily. His every move was surging with yen power. Xianxia still had her hands on her hips. I won't. Xinhua, do you agree or not? I don't agree. The middle-aged man was furious. You wretched girl? Do you know your place? Do you know what a heavenly region is? A little girl like you. You couldn't even get out of the heavenly region before you were torn apart by the astral wind. Don't give me that. I've heard this kind of lie a lot. Don't try to lie to me. I'm leaving this time. No one can stop me. Xianxia shouted. The middle-aged man clearly had no intention of tolerating this unruly and willful girl. With a wave of his hand, thousands of wisps of light immediately firmly wrapped around Xianxia and dragged her down from the mountain rock. Just you wait, girl. You can forget about getting out even if you miss 1 year out of 100 years of confinement. Ah, no, father. I don't want to be confined. Xianxia screamed and struggled, but she was only at the peak of the entry yen stage. How could she break free from the restraints of a yen immortal? Right at this moment, a stream of light instantly shot down from the mountain rock, directly cutting off the light in the middle-aged man's hand. Then he directly carried Xianxia on his back and ran. Due to its extreme speed, by the time he reacted, the stream of light had already fled more than 100 miles away. It was a strange beast that was completely snow-white and looked like a fox but also like a mystic tiger. It was so fast that it carried Xianxia and escaped from the mountain gate of Xianxia Pavilion in a flash. All elders and disciples of the Xianxia Pavilion, listen up. Capture Xianxia alive. I'll Bethroth her. To whoever that catches her. For a moment, all the sects of the Xianxia Pavilion were in an uproar. A total of more than 60,000 disciples were all dispatched to capture Xianxia alive. Jian Wushuang, who had been waiting outside the mountain mate, raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard the warning that resounded through the sky. A moment later, a gust of fragrant wind swept out from the mountain gate. Xianxia, who was riding on the back of the strange beast, was excited. My lord, my father has agreed. Let's run. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other and then shook their heads helplessly. In this originally misty and aloof mountain gate, a grand chase was staged. 3 figures broke through the clouds and flew up, followed by tens of thousands of disciples. They were quite frightened. However, with the help of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing, the tens of thousands of disciples could only watch the 3 figures disappear into the sky like stars. The middle-aged man rushed over after a while, but when he saw that the clouds had already been emptied, there was no sign of his daughter. He was in despair and roared. Who is it? Who took my daughter away? In the distance, the sound of Xianxia seemed to come from the heavens. Father, don't worry. I will be safe and sound. Maybe I will find mother in the process of my travels in the future. You're gonna anger me to death. The clouds and smoke dispersed, and the blue sky disappeared. In its place was an endless void. Countless suns and stars decorated it, and many heavenly regions and planes also entered her eyes. It's so beautiful. No wonder my mother left my father to travel in the void. Xianxia muttered. Jian Wushuang did not want to ask about her family's private affairs. He also knew that the girl had snuck out without her father's permission, so he planned to send her back once he knew the exact location of the Upper Desolate. Then, he asked, I say, Miss Shi, do you know where the Upper Desolate heavenly region is? Xianxia regained her senses and blinked her lively eyes. Then, she said with certainty, I definitely know. It's there. With that, She stretched out her slender palm and pointed to a desolate void where even the sun and stars were rare. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing were on their last legs. They did not care if she was telling the truth or not. After confirming it again, they moved forward. With his Yen power's protection, even though Shi Qingqi was only at the peak of entry Yen cultivation realm, she could still deal with the terrifying void astral winds with ease. The 10-feet-long strange beast that was originally under Shi Qingqi had now shrunk to the length of an arm, and was lying on the back of her neck with its eyes closed in comfort. The man and beast did not feel that traveling through the void was a dangerous thing. Instead, they were very relaxed. Jian Wushuang was helpless. This girl was simply an extra-large burden. If he really took her to the Great Me Heaven, he was afraid that there might be trouble. Di Qing's face was cold. Perhaps he was in a bad mood because he was tricked by those guys who were guarding the Immortal array not long ago, so he naturally did not have a good impression of Shi Qingqi. In his opinion, the lower the cultivation level of a person, the more sinister and cunning they were, and this included the woman in front of him. "Are you leading the way correctly?" Di Qing still did not believe her and asked. Shi Qingqi held little beast in her arms, and she dodged his gaze. "Oh, of course it's right. I went with my father back then." He snorted coldly again. "If you dare to lie to us, you'll end up like them." With that, Di Qing clenched his fist and several ancient stars exploded. An unimaginable doomsday scene appeared in the void, and a black hole was formed in the void. Gulp! Shi Qingqi swallowed hard, and the corners of her mouth twitched involuntarily. Even her father could not do such a destructive thing. The little beast in her arms seemed to feel threatened and bared its teeth at Di Qing. "All right, let's continue our journey," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. His peaceful aura calmed Di Qing down, and he was no longer troubled by Shi Qingqi. After recovering from the chill just now, Shi Qingqi was already regretting leaving her heavenly region. She shouted in her heart, "Who knows where that damn upper desolate is? I was just saying it casually. Do you have to be so serious?" The upper desolate, as its name suggests, must be a desolate and broken heavenly region. It must be right to think about it this way. God bless me that I didn't point me in the wrong direction. God bless. There was no turning back. Shi Qingqi had already decided to be stubborn to the end. Since there was no way out, she might as well let go. In order to increase her credibility, she waved her hand from time to time to correct the way forward, running toward the more remote and desolate depths of the void. Jian Wushuang nodded to himself. From the route she pointed out, it was basically in line with the environment of the upper desolate heavenly region. As they moved forward, there were very few heavenly regions and heavenly realms in the boundless void. Even the great sun and stars were very rare. Everything in sight was deathly silent and cold. This extremely boring journey, accompanied by the cold and dry void, made the initial excitement of Shi Qingqi turn into fatigue. This journey was completely different from what she had imagined, where she would be independent with a sword, dressed in fresh clothes and riding a horse. However, there was no turning back now that she had chosen this path. The journey in the void seemed to be never-ending, and Shi Qingqi was already dizzy and muddled. Jian Wushuang finally smelled the aura of a restriction in the void. Di Qing naturally felt it as well, and he opened his golden eyes to investigate. The aura of the restriction was ancient, silent, and extremely secretive. It was obvious that the Almighty who set up this kind of aura restriction did not want to be detected by others. Jian Wushuang was the most sensitive to aura comprehension. Soon, he locked his eyes on the deep void in front of him. In that place, there was an ancient heavenly region that had been silent for countless years and no cultivators had ever stepped into it. "Is that place the upper desolate?" Jian Wushuang murmured but quickly denied it. The upper desolate was a barren land. The scorching dark red was like a purgatory. It was completely different from this heavenly region. However, to be on the safe side, he still decided to go and find out. The three figures flew toward the unnamed heavenly region like flowing lights. The ancient and silent power of the restriction covered the entire heavenly region like a layer of sticky water. As soon as they entered, they felt an unparalleled pressure. Xianxia grunted and the aura around it immediately weakened. Even Jian Wushuang felt the pressure, let alone her. As far as the eye could see, the entire heavenly region realm was made up of rugged dark red rocks. Other than the mountain rocks, there were no other existences. The restrictive aura was even more obvious, but he didn't know where it came from. "Are you sure this is Upper Desolate?" Di Qing asked Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked around and finally looked at Xianxia. With his yen power's protection, Xianxia quickly recovered from her daze. However, when it saw the two of them looking at her, she broke out in a cold sweat. "It looks like, probably not. Is it or not?" Di Qing shouted in a deep voice. "Why are you so fierce?" In the end, Xianxia did not dare to finish her sentence. She only shook her head. "No, definitely not." Jian Wushuang said, "Since this is not the place, let's leave. We can't delay our journey." Di Qing nodded. When Xianxia was about to leave, she suddenly screamed. The little beast that had been sitting on her neck seemed to be pulled by some unknown force and fell straight down. "San Qing!" She cried out in alarm and then rushed to the ground without a care. Jian Wushuang frowned and rushed down with a flash. Perhaps it was because of the restrictive spell, the gravity in this area was millions of times heavier, and the falling speed was extremely fast. After that, a bunch of brilliant rays caught the falling little beast and Xianxia, and finally let her land safely. Xianxia held the little beast and sat on the ground, looking at Jian Wushuang gratefully. "Don't be so reckless next time. Leave quickly," he said indifferently, then turned around and prepared to leave. At this moment, the ancient aura seemed to wake up from the ancient times and gushed out. "Emperor, is that you?" An excited and ancient voice resounded throughout the entire heavenly region. The voice contained order, the great Tao, and the blessing of fate energy. It was extremely complicated and rare. Xianxia was so shocked that she stood up in an instant and jumped behind Jian Wushuang like a rabbit. "Emperor, is it you? Are you here to welcome us?" The voice was deep and filled with excitement and uncertainty as it carefully inquired. Di Qing was also shocked. Facing the aura of the voice, he felt like he was facing a great enemy. Jian Wushuang remained silent. At the same time, he retreated slowly, ready to escape at any time. Now that things had come to this, he understood that this heavenly region that he had accidentally barged into was likely to seal an ancient almighty existence. Furthermore, it was very likely that this ancient mighty figure was sealed when Jin Wuyang opened up the Great Sea region, and they were in a hostile state. Xianxia squatted behind Jian Wushuang and looked around with her beautiful eyes in horror. "The Emperor? Emperor, why aren't you saying anything?" The voice that could intimidate Di Qing was extremely careful, showing a sense of submission. Jian Wushuang, who was originally a little nervous, calmed down because he could hear the respect and rich feeling in the voice. It was definitely not a treacherous villain. "Wushuang, quickly leave this place," Di Qing said cautiously. Jian Wushuang looked at him and then said, "No hurry. Let's wait here for a while." With that, he slowly walked forward. "Wait for me," he said. Xianxia quickly followed, afraid that she would fall behind. Di Qing frowned and eventually followed without saying a word. The reason why Jian Wushuang did not leave but walked forward slowly was that the calls gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity, which was strange. The further they went, the clearer the sound became. "Your subjects pay their respects to the Emperor." An ancient cry seemed to come from the earth's core, respectful and pious to the extreme. Jian Wushuang was moved. Then he looked at the craggy rocks under his feet. The sounds obviously came from the core of the earth. After a moment of silence, he said, "Everyone, I'm just a passerby, not your emperor." The voices disappeared and then resounded again. "That's impossible. You have the aura of an emperor around you. How can you not be a subordinate emperor? Emperor, are you going to give up on your subjects?" The voice suddenly sounded sad and lonely. "I'm really not your emperor. I'm just a passerby who accidentally entered this place." Jian Wushuang was helpless. At the same time, he asked, "What's the name of your emperor?" Those voices suddenly became alert. Are you all the lackeys of Zhen Wuyang? Jian Wushuang replied, No, don't worry. The voice fell silent for a moment before it finally said, This is the Emperor's true name, Emperor Luya. The thought in his heart was like a thunderclap. Wasn't the name Emperor Luya the owner of the former heavenly court that Jian Wushuang and the others had unintentionally entered earlier? It was impossible for the Emperor's true name to be repeated. Combined with the excitement and piety of these voices, they were definitely once the Emperor Lu Ya's subjects. However, this was too much of a coincidence. He had accidentally entered a heavenly region, and the Almighty being sealed inside was actually related to the Emperor Luya. Since you said that you're a passerby, why do you have the aura of Emperor Luya on you? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang said, This matter can't be explained in a few words. Please show yourselves. The world was silent for a long time before the voice sighed. It's not that we don't want to show ourselves, but we're really powerless. Our immortal source has been imprisoned by the men under Zhen Wuyang. Our divine bodies are bound and we can't move at all. Jian Wushuang was moved. From the direction of the sound, he had already determined that the place where they were imprisoned was the divine mountain in front of them. He leaped up and faced the divine peak. His fingers were like blades, and thousands of sword intents rose up, cutting the divine peak in half with great momentum. Swish! The entire divine peak was split into two. At the same time, Jian Wushuang released his sword intent continuously and cut the divine peak like a sculpture. In the end, the entire divine peak was cut off, leaving only a base that was thousands of feet tall. Then, with a wave of his hand, stone chips kept falling off, and finally, chains as thick and long as true dragons were revealed. There were more than 1,000 chains, and at the end of the chains 18 figures were bound. The clothes on their bodies were already in tatters, and their bound limbs were twisted in a rather strange posture. It was obvious that they had been broken. Just like that, a total of 18 figures were imprinted in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Xianxia covered her mouth with her hand, afraid of making a sound. Di Qing also frowned and was always on guard. 18 figures, 18 grand yen immortals. However, Jian Wushuang did not expect them to be in such a miserable state. In the face of such a huge movement, the 18 figures naturally noticed it, but they were all at a loss. No one looked at Jian Wushuang and the others, as if they did not exist. Jian Wushuang looked at them and quickly found the reason. These 18 grand yen immortals had their eyeballs dug out, leaving only empty eye sockets. Naturally, they could not see the outside world. Are you still there? The leader of the group, an old man with long eyebrows, asked carefully. Jian Wushuang nodded. I'm here. If that's the case, can you tell me why you have the Emperor Lu Ya's aura on you? The long-browed old man said. Of course, I can tell you. Jian Wushuang did not intend to hide anything. He immediately told them in detail about how he had unintentionally entered Emperor Lu Ya's heavenly court and how he had obtained Emperor Lu Ya's comprehension. Di Qing was cautious. He immediately released yen power and wrapped it around Xianxia, who was perking up her ears and ready to listen. Di Qing made sure that Jian Wushuang's words could not be heard by anyone other than them. After all, this was a matter of life and death. If word got out, the consequences would be disastrous. Time passed by. When Jian Wushuang's voice finally stopped, everything fell silent. The 18 grand yen immortals were silent, as if their hearts had died. As their eyes had been dug out, they naturally could not cry out in grief, and could only remain in a daze. Finally, the long-browed old man asked, Are they all dead? That's right. None of the yen immortals and grand yen immortals survived. Jian Wushuang's words were like a sharp knife that cut them ruthlessly. Lowering his head, the long-browed elder mournfully said, I was incompetent. In the end, I couldn't protect the heavenly court and the emperor. Jian Wushuang's heart was as solid as a rock after all the cultivation. But a perfect state of mind did not mean that he was cold-blooded. He had seen countless immortal bones in the heavenly region. Every one of them was a yen immortal who dominated a heavenly region, but they were all killed in the war between the emperors. The reason why they resonated with each other was because they had seen each other before. Naturally, they could feel the depth of their hearts. Jian Wushuang's state of mind seemed to have cleared up after he said this. In the end, the long-browed elder slowly raised his head and looked in Jian Wushuang's direction. He said slowly, "Since the emperor has given you his inheritance and comprehension, you should live well. Although I want to kill Zhen Wuyang all the time, I want to tell you that you should never fight with him. Leave him and live on with Emperor Liu Ye's last wish." "Why?" Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked. The long-browed elder's voice was filled with sorrow and despair. "There's no reason. Zhen Wuyang has an unknown fate energy. Even the emperor can't kill him. As long as he doesn't want to die, no one can kill him. If you were to face him one day, you'd only end up dying in vain. Rather than sending yourself to death, why don't you take Emperor Liu Ye's last wish and leave Zhen Wuyang far away?" Jian Wushuang did not comment on his words because with his current cultivation realm and power, fighting with an emperor was still too far away for him. Then Jian Wushuang said, "I will consider what you said. But before that, may I ask what kind of tasks you once served under Emperor Liu Ye and why you were trapped here?" When the long-browed elder heard this, his sorrowful expression slowly disappeared. He said, "The 18 of us once worked under the Emperor Liu Ye. We controlled the flow of the entire Heavenly Court's fate energy and the changes of the constellations. We were also conferred the title of the 18 Observers by the Emperor Liu Ye. The reason why we're resealed here is because it's part of Zhen Wuyang's plan. Before the war started, he made an oath that as long as the 18 of us found the most suitable place for him to build the Heavenly Court, he would not start a war with us. I didn't expect that this was all a plot he had planned. After he controlled the 18 of us, he attacked Emperor Liu Ye's Heavenly Court. But we didn't know about this. After we were controlled by Zhen Wuyang, we chose a place for him to build the Heavenly Court. In the end, he completed the creation of the Heavenly Court, and then our immortal source was destroyed, our immortal body was broken, and our eyes were chiseled out by his lackeys. We were trapped under this gloomy heavenly region until today." The long-browed elder looked calm as if he was recounting someone else's story. However, Jian Wushuang knew that they were definitely not calm. Their immortal source was destroyed, their immortal bodies were broken, their eyes were gouged out, and they were trapped in the cold dead zone until now. This was the ultimate punishment. Who could have such a heart to endure it until now? But even so, the 18 grand yen immortals had waited bitterly until now, hoping that Emperor Liu Ye would bring them back. What they received was the despairing news that even the emperor had passed away. "Your Excellency, the 18 of us have a presumptuous request, and we hope you can agree to it," the long-browed old man said. "The emperor and the warriors of the Heavenly Court have all passed away. We are the only 18 pieces of trash left. We are of no use to them anymore. So, I would like to ask you to spare no effort and execute us. It would be a relief for us." Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. It was absolutely impossible for him to kill them. Just the fact that the Emperor Liu Ye was his benefactor made it impossible for him to kill them, not even with good intentions. After thinking for a moment, he flew forward and arrived in front of them. "I owe the Emperor Liu Ye a debt of gratitude, and you are the last 18 of the Heavenly Court. I can't do anything to you, so after thinking about it, I can only bring you away." As soon as Jian Wushuang finished speaking, an invisible sword condensed in his palm and was about to cut off the chains around them. "Your Excellency, you can't." The long-browed elder seemed to have expected Jian Wushuang to do this. He said hurriedly, "There is a restriction placed on the chain by Zhen Wuyang. Once it is damaged by external forces, he will definitely notice it at once. By then, none of us will survive." Jian Wushuang stopped in time and frowned. He took a closer look and saw that there was indeed a restriction on the chain. That was to say, as long as the chain was damaged, Zhen Wuyang would definitely notice it at once. "We've observed the phenomenon for 18 years. We only wish to die. Please grant us our wish." This time, the 18 grand yen immortals spoke at the same time. "It's impossible for you to die. At the very least, don't even think about dying by my hands," Jian Wushuang said. Only the 18 of you are left alive in the entire heavenly court. If you die as well, then the heavenly court of Emperor Luya will truly be destroyed. If you let me live well, you can also live well. But we, the long-browed elder, could not bear to say that it was far better for them to die than to live with this appearance. Listen, you guys will continue like this. When I'm strong enough or can avoid being discovered by Zhen Wuyang, I'll come and save you. How about it? Jian Wushuang said seriously. None of the 18 figures spoke this time. Your Excellency, why do you have to do this? There's no such thing as suffering or not. I'll just treat it as I've received Emperor Luya's kindness and repay him bit by bit. After a long while, the long-browed elder said solemnly, Forget it. What's the point of waiting any longer? If you have enough strength in a year and can still think of us, then come. At that time we, the 18 observers, will be at your command. There's no need for that. You just need to remember that I'm here to return the favor. I don't think that day will be too late. Just wait for me. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and said, I'm also searching for something right now, so I can't stay here for too long. Please forgive me. The long-browed elder nodded. Go ahead, sir. There's no need to worry about us. Jian Wushuang cupped his hands at them and then slowly retreated. Just as he was about to leave, he turned around and said loudly, Everyone, remember that my name is Jian Wushuang. All right? We'll remember that. In the end, the divine peak condensed again and sealed the 18 observers again. Along with it, the unbearable memory was sealed. Jian Wushuang sighed in his heart and then left the heavenly region he had entered unintentionally with Di Qing and Shi Qingqi. To those grand Yen immortals who had already lost all hope from the bottom of their hearts, endless longevity was like a deep and cold cage, an extreme punishment. They could not change the current situation and could only rely on the unknown. What Jian Wushuang could do was to improve his cultivation realm as much as possible so that they could get out of purgatory. All living things were miserable. Even the powerful grand Yen immortal was like a lonely boat, silently or tragically dying in the torrent that was about to rise at some point. The vast and boundless Great Sea region was like a cage without a door. There might be some changes every generation. If the Great Sea region, which was merely a speck of dust in the extreme Great Yen domain, was so cruel, what kind of existence was the Great Yen domain? When the entire Great Yen domain was revealed to Jian Wushuang, what would it be like? Xianxia, his master. Old master, his teacher. What role would they play here? He was full of anticipation. Fear was never his way of solving problems. From the beginning to the end, there was no fear in his eyes. There was a mountain in front of him, but there was no path, so he had to forcefully open up a great Tao,